Excellencies, distinguished delegates, as we are about to commence the opening of the conference, may I kindly request all delegates to please take their seats. Thank you. A kind reminder for all delegates to please take their seats. The conference will begin promptly. Thank you. Please now take your seats. The conference will begin shortly. A reminder for everyone now to take their seats. Thank you. For those filling in from the back, please kindly take your seats. The conference is about to commence. As we're about to commence, a final reminder for people to please take their seats. A kind reminder for people to now take their seats. Thank you. For those gathered towards the back, please make your way to the seating areas. Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, good morning and thank you once again for joining us at the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on the Beijing+30 review. We're about to begin. Please take your seats. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, good morning and thank you once again for joining us at the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on the Beijing+30 review. Please join me in welcoming our special guests now entering the room. His Excellency Warawut Silapa'asha, Minister of Social Development and Human Security, Thailand. Ms. Armida Salcia Alice Jabana, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP. And Ms. Seema Bahaus, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Director of UN Women. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, a very warm welcome to the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on the Beijing+30 review. Kindly note that simultaneous interpretation of the proceedings is provided for 4 languages of the United Nations used by ESCAP for the purpose of facilitating communication. The event will be webcast, and real-time captioning and international sign language interpretation are provided during the session. Delegates are encouraged to register their intention to intervene prior to the beginning of an agenda item, if they have not done so already. You may do so with the Secretariat at the conference office desk located on the right. Delegates who register their intention to speak prior to the beginning of an agenda item will be given priority. Thank you for your kind attention. We now invite you to watch the opening video.
In 1995, the world gathered in Beijing to call for bold, transformative actions for the rights of women and girls. These voices unified into the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, a global commitment to make gender equality a reality for women and girls everywhere. It's been nearly 30 years since this pledge was made. Have we delivered? Across Asia and the Pacific, considerable progress has been made in key areas of gender equality. Several countries have eradicated extreme poverty, expanded healthcare, and enhanced social protection for women and girls. Education gaps are closing, and women's representation in parliaments has increased. But despite these gains, the region's progress in other areas is stagnating or even regressing. Women and girls in the region continue to face discriminatory social norms, gender stereotypes, high levels of gender-based violence, and perform an unequal share of unpaid care and domestic work that restricts their participation in the labor force. Women and girls also continue to be disproportionately affected by crises. This includes bearing the brunt of COVID-19 pandemic fallout, climate change, food insecurity and energy crises, growing digital divides, and escalating geopolitical tensions. To achieve gender equality and women's empowerment in the region, more needs to be done. More effort, more dedication, more urgency. 2025 marks the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, the 25th anniversary of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on Women, Peace, and Security, and the final 5 years of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It's an ideal time to seize the opportunity, strengthen gender-responsive action, and deliver on past promises. At this Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference, the policy dialogue will focus on identifying strategies for accelerating gender equality across 6 priority areas: poverty reduction and human capital development, shared prosperity and decent work, freedom from gender-based violence, meaningful participation and gender-responsive governance, peaceful and just societies, gender and the environment. We will also take a closer look at emerging issues and trends, including the care, digital, and green economies. With the collective efforts of governments, civil society, and other stakeholders, we have the power to advance gender equality and create equal opportunities for women and girls. For the generation that championed the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and the generations that will carry its legacy, the call to act is more urgent than ever. Now is the time to unite, strategize, and make gender equality a lived reality for women and girls everywhere.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates. It is now my honor to invite His Excellency Warawut Silapa-Asha, Minister of Social Development and Human Security, Thailand, to deliver his opening remarks. Please, Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Your Excellency, Madame Amida Socialis Shabana, the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of the ESCAP, Madame Sima Baus, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Director of UN Women, Honorable Ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all, and Sawasdee krap. Now, on behalf of the government of the Kingdom of Thailand, I'd like to take this opportunity to warmly welcome every single one of you to this wonderful Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on Beijing+30 review here in Bangkok, or the City of Angel. In this regard, I'd like to express our sincere appreciation to the United Nations Economic Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, or ESCAP, and the UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific for their collaborative efforts in organizing this ministerial conference. And I would like to take this opportunity to remind all of us gathering right here that we are at the critical juncture in moving towards the achievement of our commitments under the landmark agenda that human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights. It is at the heart. Thank you. Thank you. And it is at the heart of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, or BPFA. And next year, 2025, we shall celebrate the 30th anniversary of the 4th World Conference on Women and Adoption of BPFA. And since then, the global community has strived to advancing gender equality, empowering women, and ensuring that the rights of women and girls remain at the forefront of our development priorities. We have held each other accountable, and we are pleased to note that the progress made in a number of areas. Despite the commendable progress, however, the global community still confronts with substantial challenges. Persistent issues like gender-based violence and discrimination continues to impede the advancement. And additionally, the impacts of climate change, natural disasters, digital transformation, economic instability, pandemics, and other emerging crises have intensified vulnerabilities and decelerated headway towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal 5 on gender equality. Ladies and gentlemen, we are failing women and girls, so we have much, much more work to do. And that's why our endeavor to accomplish the canons outlined in Beijing remains as important as ever before. This means increasing the investment, political will, and addressing the rising attacks on gender equality and human rights around the world are of paramount. Redouble our efforts on this agenda is a must. And in this regard, I, as a gentleman and as a Minister of Social Development and Human Security of Thailand, view that to hasten our pace, men and boys must be counted. They must play the crucial role as allies, agents of change, as well as beneficiaries of gender equality. Achieving gender equality requires the active participation and commitments of all stakeholders in working together to dismantle systemic barriers to promote equal opportunities for all. And for Thailand, we remain committed to advancing gender equality and to promoting and protecting the human rights of women, girls, LGBTQ+, and individuals, particularly those who face multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination. And we take this task seriously. We are making historical movement in gender equality by issuing a first ever landmark piece of legislation, which is the Equal Marriage Law that champions the universal human right to form a family. And this makes Thailand the first ever country in Southeast Asia, the third in Asia, and the 37th in the world to enact such law. And this law will be completely into force on January 22nd in 2025. So January 23rd of January next year, whoever wants to get married, please come to Thailand. We'll provide a facility. And this transformative law not only legalizes marriage beyond traditional norms, but also signifies that love transcends boundaries. And it really brings about a paradigm shift in Thailand's family law. Ladies and gentlemen, we are less than 4 months away from the 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, where the achievements and challenges of the implementation of BPFA will be revealed. And it is anticipated that the political commitments in gender equality will be eventually intensified. And therefore, I wish that this ministerial conference will be the extraordinary opportunity for all of us to build a regional consensus on actions needed to accelerate the implementation of the commitments made in the BPFA. And this must serve as the region's input to the deliberations at the 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women in 2025 next year. And in this regard, Thailand stands ready to work with all ESCAP member states, associate member states, as well as CSOs and the relevant organizations and stakeholders to uphold the principles of Beijing Declaration, ensuring that we will not lose our path towards the Sustainable Development Goal 5 on gender equality. And while arduous works are lying before us, but I'm confident that our region has the ingenuity, the enthusiasm, and the spirit to delivering a better life and more sustainable future. And need for effective cooperation amongst ourselves now has never been greater. And I thus implore, I would like to urge all of us to put together in full cooperation. And lastly, I wish you all a great success in your endeavor and have a pleasant stay in Thailand. And I hope that in the next few days, you would be able to make time to see yourself the true vibrant city of Bangkok and enjoy the Thailand Winter Festival during your stay, not just this meeting room. Have a wonderful stay, a wonderful conference, and thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Khop khun krap.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your valuable opening remarks underscoring Thailand's ongoing efforts to support the Beijing+30 process and issuing such a strong call to action to motivate us here today. I am now delighted to invite Ms. Armida Salcia Alice Jabana, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, to deliver her opening remarks. Ms. Alice Jabana, the floor is yours.
Excellency, Mr. Faravut Silpa Archa, Minister of Social Development and Human Security of Thailand, Ms. Sima Bahus, Under-Secretary General of the UN and Executive Director of UN Women, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, friends and colleagues from civil society and youth organizations. A very warm welcome to the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on the Beijing+30 Review. In 1995, the Beijing Declaration became the world's most powerful vision for gender equality, laying out a comprehensive path to securing equal rights and opportunities for women and girls. Over the past 3 decades, this framework has not only shaped national policies, but has also inspired legal reforms and guided efforts at the global, regional, as well as national levels toward advancing gender equality. This conference serves as a landmark moment to celebrate our progress, assess the challenges that remain, and redouble our efforts to make the truth of the promises made almost 30 years ago. In that spirit, I'm pleased to note that more girls across Asia and the Pacific are in school today than ever before, opening new avenues for them to shape their future. Maternal mortality has dropped by a third since 2000, meaning countless mothers are surviving childbirth and thriving with their families. Women have gained greater access to leadership positions in politics, business, and decision-making spaces, driving transformative change and inspiring the next generation of leaders. These achievements remind us that change is possible when we work together with determination and vision. But as we celebrate, we must confront a sobering reality that not all news is good. In many areas, progress has been uneven and in some cases, even fragile. We cannot ignore that more than 1 in 4 women in our region have faced intimate partner violence, a grave violation of their dignity, safety, as well as fundamental human rights. We cannot ignore that women are spending up to 5 times more hours than men on unpaid care and domestic work, limiting their opportunities for education, paid employment, as well as leisure. And we certainly cannot ignore that persistent gender stereotypes, discriminatory norms, and unequal power relations remain deeply entrenched, obstructing our path to gender equality. Excellencies, when we last gathered here in November 2019, that was 5 years ago, for the Beijing+25 review, we were unprepared for the seismic shift that was just weeks away. The COVID-19 pandemic swept across the globe, altering our world in unprecedented ways. Its reverberations were felt everywhere, but none more acutely than in the lives of women and girls in our region, particularly those from marginalized and vulnerable communities. While life may have gradually returned to normal for many, the pandemic's lingering effects, including increased care burdens, economic setbacks, and heightened vulnerability to violence, have exacerbated existing disparities and pushed many women and girls into hardship, underscoring the urgent need for our collective action. Simultaneously, the megatrends of digitalization, demographic shifts, and the climate crisis have continued to dramatically reshape our world since our last review. These changes present both challenges and opportunities. Digital innovation has the potential to empower women and girls, but without placing gender equality at its core, it risks creating a new digital divide. Similarly, the green transition must be more than green. It must be just and recognize women as vital agents of change, climate action. If we are bold and committed, we can transform these megatrends into mega solutions to not only recover from the setbacks of the past, but also to pave the way for a brighter and more inclusive tomorrow. Excellencies, to drive forward meaningful change, we must take bold, decisive actions across 3 critical areas. Where progress has been made, we must keep accelerating. While women's participation has increased, it is still below the global average, with women holding less than a quarter of parliamentary seats in the region in 2024. What we need is more gender-responsive governance initiatives, such as legislative action, for example, requiring certain percentage of electoral candidates to be women. Such initiatives will move the needle on women's share of parliamentary seats. This has spurred initiatives that build the capacity of women to engage on the political stage, thereby not only transforming gender power dynamics, but also creating more inclusive and effective policies that benefit society as a whole. Where persistent gaps exist, we must break down barriers. For 30 years, women's labor force participation has remained stubbornly lower than men's, constrained by structural barriers, including unequal access to resources and decent work. It is time to close these gaps by prioritizing women's economic empowerment. Other initiatives include targeted investment in the care economy to unlock women's economic potential. This is not just a moral imperative, it is essential for sustainable growth as well as prosperity. Where new opportunities emerge, we must ensure women and girls are positioned to thrive. Women must be at the forefront or center of the issues that define our common future: climate action and digital transformation. These are the mega trends of our time, and without a focus on gender equality, they risk deepening inequalities. We must provide women with the tools, training, and resources to lead in these areas to ensure they not only participate in, but also drive forward the solutions of tomorrow. Excellencies, we are here together now and today for the next 2 days to evaluate progress, to raise ambition, to foster collaboration, and to innovate solutions to the top priorities identified by our member states. Let this conference be the catalyst for renewed commitments, innovative solutions, as well as bold actions. The future of gender equality in Asia and the Pacific and beyond depends on the steps we take today. Together, we can transform the vision of the Beijing Declaration into a reality for all women and girls. I wish you all a very successful deliberation and conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Alice Jubana, for your inspiring opening remarks, reflecting on both progress and challenges in gender equality in the region. Now it is my honor to invite Ms. Sima Bahous, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Director of UN Women, to deliver her opening remarks. Ms. Bahous, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Honorable Minister of Social Development of Thailand, Your Excellency Silpa Archa, my dear colleague, Madam Armida Alice Shahabana, USG and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Excellencies, distinguished guests, civil society representatives, delegates, young feminists, all protocols observed. I am honored to address you today at this Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on the Beijing+30 review. To our host government, Thailand, my deep gratitude for our long-standing partnership and the very warm welcome. This is truly the land of smiles, but also it is a country where you can be very proud of the advancements made for women's rights. To all governments represented here today and to all delegates, we thank you for your steadfast commitment to gender equality, to women and girls' empowerment and rights. Your support for the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action has been the foundation for progress of the past 3 decades. To all civil society colleagues and youth representatives here today, those who were with us in Beijing 20 years ago, and those who have never known a world without it, thank you for what you have done, what you do, and what you will do, and importantly, for holding us accountable to the platform's legacy. To my dear friends at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, ESCAP, under the leadership of my colleague, Madam Armida Alice Shahabana, Under-Secretary General and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, thank you for your tireless efforts alongside us to organize this ministerial meeting and regional review. To my colleagues across the wider UN system, thank you also for your partnership and support at both regional and national levels. Allow me also to thank our brilliant team at UN Women here in Thailand and across the world, who I believe you all have come to know very well in each and every one of your countries. Excellencies, next year we commemorate 30 years since 189 countries affirmed a vision of a world where every woman and every girl would live free from discrimination, violence, and equality. I have just arrived from Beijing, China, where I had the privilege to see and to relive the historic moments at that seminal meeting in 1995 as I was touring the National Museum of Women. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action remains the most visionary roadmap for advancing gender equality, empowerment, and the rights of all women and girls everywhere. It has been an inspiration in the truest sense. In that spirit of inspiration, I pay tribute here to the women and girls whose efforts have driven and still drive this agenda. The peace builders of Myanmar, Papua New Guinea, and beyond, the feminist climate justice movement in the Pacific, the activists across the region who have championed the cause of a caring economy, the women fighting each day for their voices to be heard in Afghanistan, the adolescent girls forging new pathways as innovators of digital technology across all countries in the region. To all women of this region, and also to all women beyond, to women in Gaza, fighting famine, displacement, relentless attacks and wars, in Sudan, in Ukraine, in Haiti, in the Sahel, women everywhere pay the highest price for conflicts not of their making. To all women's human rights defenders, I say this: you are seen, your work recognized, your energy for equality honored, your long journey for justice imprinted on memory for generations to come. Thanks to these efforts and those of governments in prioritizing women's rights, the Asia-Pacific region has made significant strides these last 30 years. There has been an increase in women's political participation, with women now holding nearly 21% of parliamentary seats and 5 countries with more than 25% of women in cabinet ministries. The example of Timor-Leste, where almost 39% of parliamentarians are women, the highest in the Asia-Pacific region, for example, is worthy of global recognition. Our host country, Thailand, is among the global leads in women business. 24% of CEOs in Thailand are women, compared to 20% worldwide and only 13% in the Asia-Pacific. 13 countries across the region have national action plans on women, peace, and security, as does ASEAN at a regional level, forming an important foundation for prosperity and peace. Excellencies, these commendable achievements must be recognized and applauded. Yet, they sit alongside a list of challenges and promises unfulfilled. Our latest World SDG 5 Snapshot Report tells us a clear and stark story. We are racing against time for gender equality and women's empowerment to become a lived reality for all women and girls everywhere. And we are doing so in a global context where the pushback is well organized, well funded, threatens women human rights defenders everywhere, and undermines the ability of the international community to deliver for women and girls. The COVID-19 pandemic pushed an estimated 47 million into extreme poverty. As so often, women and girls were disproportionately affected. The pandemic further deepened an existing gender gap. It is estimated that by 2030, South Asia will face a striking disparity of 129 poor women for every 100 poor men. all against the backdrop of escalating climate change-induced disasters. We also know that women across all subregions of Asia and the Pacific face barriers to economic empowerment. 3 in 5 employed women are engaged in formal work with little to no social protection. In 12 out of 20 Asia-Pacific countries, women make up less than 40% of the STEM workforce, limiting their participation in high-growth industries. The unpaid care burden still constrains women's economic lives, with women across Asia and the Pacific performing 2.3 times more care work than men, restricting their ability to engage in formal employment. We are all acutely aware that changes in the environment are already and will continue to be the single greatest threat to the security and well-being of people in the Pacific. Continued inequalities in women and girls' access to rights, opportunities, resources, and knowledge places them at greater risks. Excellencies, one of the most pressing challenges remains violence against women and girls. Across the Asia and the Pacific region, 1 in 4 women has experienced physical or sexual violence by an intimate partner. Many women continue to lack access to essential services such as shelter, healthcare, and legal protection. Excellencies, in response to these challenges, countries across the Pacific and Asia have shown impressive leadership and action, showing once again that the principles and ambitions of the Beijing Platform for Action are no less relevant today than when they were drafted. Countries such as Tajikistan and Vietnam have introduced multi-sectoral services, including healthcare, legal, and psychosocial support, and one-stop shop service centers for survivors. Vietnam has established 3 such centers. Others, such as Bangladesh and the Solomon Islands, have advanced new efforts on women's resilience to disasters, ensuring women are leading in their communities and countries in climate change mitigation. And some, such as India and Indonesia, continue to advance temporary special measures to tackle the persistent underrepresentation of women in decision-making roles, which is a challenge common to so many countries in this region and around the world. Dear Excellencies, as we embark on a year of reviewing impact and recommitting to action and to fulfilling the promises of Beijing, UN Women will work with member states and other stakeholders to advance and scale up high-impact, high-return on investment priority actions at country level. Having reviewed the more than 140 national reports submitted globally and through consultations on priority areas, we have identified 6 actions that can be transformative if implemented. They are not exclusive and come alongside all 12 priority areas, but they are identified as common goalposts and are derived from your own national reports. These areas, which constitute our Beijing+30 action agenda, hold the potential to reduce poverty, to accelerate the economy, to give women voice, choice, and safety, and get us all back on track to the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda. These areas are: 1, accelerating parity and equal decision-making in government and state institutions. 2, putting women at the heart of inclusive and sustainable economic development approaches and the transition to green economies. 3, investments in comprehensive and gender-responsive care systems. 4, development, implementation, and resourcing of national action plans to end violence against women. 5, bridging the digital and technological gender gap. And 6, increasing accountability to women and girls in matters of peace, security, and humanitarian action. And we believe that bringing youth to the heart of all these efforts will multiply their impact. So youth continue to be a cross-cutting element of all these 6 that I have just highlighted. I welcome you all to join these efforts. Excellencies, civil society remains at the heart of our efforts, particularly women's and youth organizations. We must ensure that they have the strategic pathways and resources they need in the broadest sense to claim rights and influence action. These voices are essential in shaping the future, and we are committed to standing with them every step of the way. So, Excellencies, colleagues, partners, feminists, Beijing+30 must be a moment which resonates across the entire multilateral system. UN agencies will engage in a Beijing+30 commemorations, contribute towards the implementation of the Secretary General's Gender Equality Acceleration Plan, and most importantly, support member states to accelerate and scale up the implementation of commitments. All of these imperatives cannot be confined to spaces dedicated exclusively to discussion of gender equality. They must be front and center everywhere, across all environmental discourse, be it on the causes and consequences of inequalities between countries, the climate and environmental crises, peace and security, and democracy. We have an opportunity here and beyond to recommit to the principles of the Beijing Platform for Action. We have an opportunity to put women and girls in this region at the center of our economic, social, and political agendas. Most of all, we have an opportunity to display courage and boldness, to recommit, to focus, to act, to accelerate, and to embrace accountability for our actions and for our commitments. I have no doubt that future generations will judge us on how we rise to or fail in facing the challenges before us at this turbulent time in the world. There is no greater challenge than inequality, no greater opportunity than equality. It is simply a choice that we here must make, and I have confidence and all the confidence that we will do that together. I wish you the best with your deliberations, and I look forward to the year ahead, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bahous, for your motivating remarks. You emphasized the importance of collective action and offered valuable insights into UN Women's commitment to fostering gender equality across the Asia-Pacific region. Now, it is my honor to invite Ms. Shahzad Kufi Ahmadi, Director Justice for Equality Organization in Afghanistan, and Ms. Lin Qian Peng, Director General of Chongqing Liangjiang New District No Deaf Social Work Service Center. Ms. Ahmadi, Ms. Peng, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My friend here, Lillian, will be doing the Chinese sign interpretation. We stand here today carrying the voices and lived experiences of 800 plus civil society members in the region, who echo the resilience and struggle of millions of other women and girls in our diversities. Chair, our region is in crisis. The dominant economic model rooted in financialized globalization is entrenched in rising inequalities, authoritarianism, fueled materialization, and intensified conflicts at every level. It has plunged our nations into devastating debt crisis and intolerable austerity measures and pushed millions into deeper poverty. At this very moment, we're experiencing the severe impact of climate crisis. Women and girls, particularly those facing multiple forms of discrimination, are paying the highest price. These pose a grave threat to previously agreed normative frameworks and commitments to gender equality and fulfillment of women's rights in the region. This is very evident in the slow implementation of crucial international conventions and commitments like Beijing Platform for Action. This structural violence is it's tearing apart lives and communities and unleashing unprecedented human rights violations. Women and girls in all diversity are being targeted by escalating violence, systematic exclusion, and political inaction. We're also witnessing a surge in anti-gender and anti-right movements, driven by state and non-state actors alike. These regressive forces weaponize rhetoric to strip women of their autonomy, dismantle protections, and perpetuate patriarchal control. We urge the state members to prioritize the following. Women are not a monolith. We urge you to commit to full, effective, and accelerated implementation of BPFA. Policies and programs must acknowledge and address the specific needs of women facing multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination, including those based on caste, class, income, geographical location, rural and remote areas, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, ethnicity, disability, religious minorities, indigeneity, sexuality, widows, youth, adolescents, older women, women living with HIV and other illnesses, transgender people, sex workers, domestic workers, workers in the informal sector, survivors of trafficking, those in institutions, stateless persons, migrants, immigrants, refugees, forcibly displaced and internally displaced communities, among others. Ensure policies on peace and security that are exclusive based on local contextual needs to address the root cause of conflicts, promote transformative peace, and protect the human rights of women in all diversities. End the privatization and corporate capture of essential public services and increase public spending on health to ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health and rights, education, social protection. Member states must enforce corporate accountability to curb transactional exploitation of resources, mandate reparative investment into affected communities, and ensure that economic systems serve people, not profits. Enable meaningful participation, leadership, and influence of women, girls, and gender diverse people in the formulation and implementation of policies and programs while ensuring direct financial support to strengthen community-based, indigenous, and women-led climate solutions, community resilience, and climate adaptation strategies, as well as disaster preparedness. Commit to a climate justice framework, ensuring that climate-related policies are informed by lived experiences of women and girls in their diversity. Support and foster the community movements led by women, girls, and gender diverse people, especially those belonging to marginalized communities, in designing and evaluating programs aimed at ending sexual and gender-based violence, engaging local governance bodies, policies, educators, and health workers, and ensuring accessibility and meaningful inclusion of women with disabilities across programs and policies. Ensure that the rapid digitalization and data harvesting does no further the structural, gender, urban, rural, socioeconomic, caste, disability, and age-based inequalities, especially keeping in mind access to technology is gendered, and work towards creating technology which is built keeping the needs of marginalized women and girls in mind. Create and strengthen mechanisms to establish robust mechanisms to protect all women, girls, adolescents, human rights defenders, and activists from violence, including the technology-facilitated gender-based violence, safeguarding their lives and work. Eliminate discriminatory and regressive norms, laws, and policies on gender, disability, sexual orientation, caste, religion, ethnicity, and indignity that violate citizenship rights. SR/HR, bodily autonomy, consent, legal capacity, and decision-making. This includes discriminating laws around abortion, tackling stigma and discrimination around LGBTQIA+ people. Ratify and enforce existing global, regional, and local mechanisms like ILO Convention number 190 on violence and harassment in worlds of work to prevent violence and harassment at workplace against women and gender diverse people. We need each other now more than ever. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Kufi and Ms. Pang, for your motivating remarks, sharing the vital perspectives of civil society and the ongoing need for inclusive partnerships to achieve our shared goals. Now, it is my honor to invite Ms. Aijan Geneva, women's organization ALGA, the youth representative. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, respected speakers and dignitaries. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And today I'm speaking on behalf of young feminists from across the Asian and Pacific region. We deeply acknowledge the young women, girls, and LGBTI+ youth, especially young persons with disabilities, living in poverty in rural and remote areas and affected by war, militarism, genocide, state and non-state violence. We seek attention towards creating responsive and just systems for women and girls and all their diversity in our region. Young people face multiple and intersecting forms of structural oppression, discrimination, criminalization, marginalization, and violence, perpetuated from systems of colonialism, imperialism, fundamentalism, authoritarianism, militarism, patriarchy, capitalism, racism, casteism, classism, ageism, ableism, and more. We demand a repeal of discriminatory, ableist, and casteist legislation, including anti-gender and anti-rights laws, especially against LGBTI+ youth, ethnic, sectarian, and religious minorities, stateless persons, and other marginalized youth, and harmful practices like female genital mutilation and counseling, child, early, forced marriage, and unions now. Ensure comprehensive sexuality education, prioritizing bodily autonomy and self-determination. Legalize and destigmatize abortion care to be safe and accessible for all. Ensure universal and quality access to sexual and reproductive health, rights, and justice. We resist rapid digitalization and demand for the decolonization of tech infrastructure rooted in our unique lived realities. Bridge the gender-digital divide and address technology-facilitated gender-based violence, hate speech, disinformation, and misinformation. Ensure digital identities are not linked to access to essential social protection. We demand recognition that climate change knowledge is deeply rooted in indigenous and tribal wisdom and has gendered impacts which require targeted redressal led by communities most affected. Establish taxation, including wealth taxes, and effective resource bases for mitigating climate change effects. Establish reparative and redistributive policy systems that acknowledge historical injustice against our countries. And the neoliberal economic system, built on exploitation of informal workers, implement and enforce legal protections such as parental leave, social protection, disability care, and the right to decent and safe work, especially for youth, asylum seekers, refugees, stateless persons, internally displaced persons, documented and undocumented migrants, domestic and care workers, and stand in solidarity with workers' rights and trade unions. We demand substantive, meaningful, young feminist leadership and influence across all levels of policy decision-making, centering young women, girls, and LGBTY+ youth from marginalized, vulnerable, and historically criminalized communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Geneva, for your remarks, highlighting the important perspectives and contributions of youth towards gender equality. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I now turn to the Secretary of the Conference to conduct the election of the officers. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is my honor and pleasure to conduct the election of officers for the Bureau of the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on the Beijing+30 review. The floor is now open for nominations for the chair and vice chairs of the conference. May I now invite nominations from the floor, please. I recognize the distinguished delegate of Sri Lanka. You have the floor, ma'am.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the delegation of Sri Lanka has the great pleasure to propose the following distinguished delegates to serve on the Bureau of Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on the Beijing+30 review. For Chair, Her Excellency Dr. Ing Kantapawi, Minister of Women's Affairs, Cambodia, and for Vice Chair, all ministerial level heads of delegation in attendance. We are sure that under the able leadership of this distinguished Bureau, all the tasks assigned to us will be achieved successfully. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from Sri Lanka. The distinguished delegate of Sri Lanka has nominated for chair Her Excellency Dr. Ing Kantapawi, the Minister of Women's Affairs of Cambodia. For the vice chair of the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on Beijing+30 review, it has been proposed by the distinguished delegate that in line with previous practice of ESCAP meetings, all ministerial level heads of delegation in attendance be elected as chairs. Would any other delegation wish to take the floor? I recognize the distinguished delegate of New Zealand, please.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the delegation of New Zealand has the great pleasure to second the nomination made by the distinguished delegate of Sri Lanka. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of New Zealand for seconding the nomination. Would any other delegation wish to take the floor at this point? The distinguished delegate of Indonesia, you have the floor, sir.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, the delegation of Indonesia, in the spirit of ASEAN and beyond, and echoing the delegate of Sri Lanka, has the pleasure to also second the nomination of Her Excellency Ing Kantapawi, Minister of Women Affairs, Cambodia, as the chair of the meeting. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Indonesia for seconding the nomination. Thank you, ma'am. Would any other delegation would like to take the floor at this moment? I see none. I therefore have the honor to declare the following delegates elected to the Bureau of the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on the Beijing+30 review. For chair, Her Excellency Dr. Ing Kantapawi, Minister of Women's Affairs of Cambodia, and for vice chairs, all ministerial level heads of delegation in attendance, which includes ministers and vice ministers. The Secretariat will incorporate the names of the vice chairs in the report of this meeting. Please join me in congratulating the newly elected chair and vice chairs, please. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, now my honor to invite Her Excellency Dr. Ing Kantapawi, Minister of Women's Affairs of Cambodia, to assume her duty as chair of the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on the Beijing+30 review. And take a seat on the rostrum, please.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good morning. On behalf of all Bureau members, I wish to express our warm appreciation to the distinguished delegates for the confidence bestowed on us. It is my distinct honor and privilege to serve as chair of the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference or the Beijing+30 Review. I hereby call the conference to order. I'm not used to. It's okay. So, welcome to the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on the Beijing+30 Review. Let me begin by extending my appreciation to the ESCAP members and associate members, international organizations, and stakeholders in attendance. I would also like to thank the ESCAP Secretariat and UN Women Regional Office for Asia and Pacific for co-organizing this important meeting. As we approach the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, we reflect on the strides made over the past 3 decades. Yet we acknowledge that the journey toward true gender equality is far from over. As the Minister of Women's Affairs in Cambodia for the past 20 years, I have personally witnessed both the remarkable progress and the persistent challenges in advancing gender equality and women empowerment, not only in Cambodia, but across the Asia-Pacific region. Yet, our presence here today is a clear reminder that while we have made significant strides, much work remains ahead of us. This meeting offers us a vital opportunity to share our success and address ongoing challenges, including the persistent gender gaps in economic empowerment, the lack of women in leadership and decision-making positions, and alarming high rate of gender-based violence. We must also be mindful of new and emerging trends, such as digitalization, climate change, and demographic shift, which are reshaping the context in which we pursue gender equality. I count on your support over the next 3 days to focus on priority action we can take to accelerate the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action in Asia and the Pacific, and to assess the progress we have made over the past 5 years. Together, let us advance toward a future where no woman or girl is left behind, and gender equality is fully acknowledged and realized across Asia and the Pacific. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, allow me to say a few words about the organization of this conference. Time management is essential to enable the smooth running of this meeting. We therefore kindly request your cooperation to, first, tailor your intervention to issues directly linked to the agenda item. Second, keep within the time limit prescribed for them. I thank you in advance for accommodating this request. Please note that I and my colleagues in the Bureau will ensure the efficient management of time. We will try, but please do understand, so that we can give all delegations the opportunity to speak. We have already received several requests to speak, and we will draw on these requests first. Delegations who have not already submitted their request to speak, who wish to take the floor, may do so by raising their nameplate. The Bureau seeks your cooperation in steering this conference to a successful conclusion. We look forward to rigorous discussion and achievement to the expected outcome. Thank you. So, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we will now move to agenda item 1, adoption of the agenda. The provisional agenda for the Asia-Pacific Ministerial Conference on the Beijing+30 review is contained in the document ESCAP/MCBR/2024/1. Does any delegation have any comment on the agenda? Apparently not. So I see none. May I propose to the conference that the provisional agenda as contained in the document ESCAP/MCBR/2024/1 2024/1 be adopted. Okay. So apparently, no objection. So the agenda is adopted. Regarding the report of the conference, it will be procedural in nature and adopted under agenda item 5. Substantive proceeding of the conference will be captured separately in the form of a chair summary and added as an addendum to the report after the conference. The chair summary will be compiled after the meeting and circulated a week after the conclusion of the meeting to members and associate members of ESCAP for fact-checking. Regarding the conduct of the meeting and in order to facilitate our deliberation, I now turn to the matter of statement in exercise of the right of reply. In line with the Rule 46 of the Rule of Procedure and practice of the parent body of the Commission, the Economic and Social Council, I propose that in exercising their right of reply, delegation should be as brief as possible and deliver that statement at the end of the meeting, at which the right is requested, or at the end of the day, whenever 2 meetings have been scheduled for that day to consider the same item. I further propose that the number of intervention in exercise of the right of reply for any delegation at a given meeting should be limited to 2 per item, with the first intervention limited to 3 minutes and the second, if any, in 2 minutes. Any comment? Objection? No? I hear no objection, so the conference will proceed accordingly. So, delegation wishing to exercise the right of reply are kindly requested to inform the conference room officer to the right of the rostrum. Should be somewhere here. Yeah. So, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, this concludes the opening of the conference. I now close agenda item 1 of this morning agenda. May I please ask the Secretariat to provide guidance for the group photo?
Thank you, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. It is now my honor to invite the Chair, as well as our opening speakers, for a group photo in front of the rostrum. Please make your way to the front of the rostrum. Thank you. Okay. Thank you to our opening speakers. Now I kindly ask our distinguished representatives to remain in place as we prepare for the next group photo. It is now my honor to invite the Bureau, including ministers and vice ministers, to join for the second photo. Thank you. Please may all heads of delegation now make their way to the stage for the group photograph, please. That's all heads of delegation. Thank you.
Everyone just came up and just move them to the second line.
All heads of delegation, please make your way onto the stage for the group photograph. Thank you. A final reminder for all heads of delegations to please make their way on stage for the group photograph. Thank you. I think I'm in the photo. And now please look upwards to the room at the top of the stage for an aerial shot. Thank you. Please continue looking upwards for the aerial shot. Thank you very much. Please may I ask people photographing from the first row to kindly sit down so that the photographers may have a clearer angle of those on stage. Thank you very much. Please look at the camera in the middle of the floor. Thank you very much. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Now may all delegates please take your seats. A kind reminder for everybody to take their seats promptly. Thank you. A reminder for all to take their seats now. Thank you. Excellencies, delegates, please take your seats. Thank you. For those in the back, also kindly proceed back to your seats. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay.
Where will the high-level panel discussion take place? So we go down.
A kind reminder to please take your seats.
A gavel? Stop. Excellent. It's okay.
This is MC.
This one. Excellencies,
Excellencies,
distinguished
may I kindly ask
delegates,
for quiet in the room. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. This concludes agenda item 1. I now hand over to the chair of the conference to open agenda item 2. Thank you.
So,
Yeah, start off, ma'am. Start off.
it's okay. We shall now take up agenda item 2 on review of the progress made towards the implementation of the Beijing Declaration, as well as the platform for action and priorities for accelerated action in Asia and the Pacific. The document pertaining to this agenda item are ESCAP/MCBR/2024/2, ESCAP MCBR 2024/3, and ESCAP MCBR 2024/4. Please note that the consideration of the draft decision contained in the document ESCAP MCBR 2024/2 and ESCAP MCBR 2024/3 will be discussed at the end of agenda item 3 tomorrow afternoon, as the draft decision contained in this document are relevant to agenda item 2 and item 3. So the conference consideration of this agenda item will begin with a high-level panel discussion on gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls in Asia and the Pacific. So it is now my honor to invite Mrs. Lin Yong, Deputy Executive Secretary for Program, ESCAP, to moderate the high-level panel discussion. So please, Ms. Yong, take your seat on the rostrum.
We can go down and listen to them, ma'am.
Yeah. And I also invite the distinguished panelists to the rostrum. So, Ms. Lin Yong, you have the floor.
We can watch from the front, ma'am.
Okay.
Come, you'll also go down.
Good morning, Excellencies, dear participants, friends, and colleagues. I now have the honor of moderating the panel discussion on the review of progress made towards the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and the platform for action, and the priorities for accelerated action in Asia and the Pacific. This panel will discuss gender equality and women's empowerment in relation to the 12 critical areas of concern in the Beijing Declaration and the platform for action, and how those are interlinked with megatrends as mentioned by the chair just now, such as climate change, digitalization, demographic shift, as well as sustainable development goals. We have an excellent panel of speakers from an intergovernmental organization, development bank, and a youth representative. Allow me to introduce each panelist and then ask 2 rounds of questions. Our first panelist is Ms. Maricini Rakuita, Principal Strategic Lead, Pacific Women at the Pacific Community, SPC. Ms. Rakuita is a qualified lawyer, and she was the youngest female politician elected to Fiji's parliament. Now, as part of the SPC executive team, she is driving gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls across the Pacific region. Ms. Rakuita, gender equality and women empowerment has advanced in some areas over the past 5 years, but also faced significant hurdles, including in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. As the principal strategic lead for Pacific Women at the SPC, what areas do you feel have made significant progress, and where do the greatest challenges remain? Ms. Rakuita.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. As a Pacific Islander, it's not lost on me the importance of this convening, not only in recognizing the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action, but also for us in the Pacific, it's also a commemoration of the 30th anniversary of our own Pacific Platform for Action. There has been a lot that has been done in the past 30 years, and indeed in the last 5. Given the time limitations for this panel, I will draw on 3 big challenges that we face as a Pacific region, but also to recognize the progress that we've made, particularly in political will, in recognition of gender equality as a key thematic that needs to be addressed in national development agendas. Gender equality is no longer recognized as just a standalone, but also recognized in our revitalized Pacific Leaders Gender Equality Declaration, for example, of last year, really putting gender equality front and center of regional development agendas and also at a national level. I recognize the efforts of our national governments in the Pacific in the political will that has been put in putting together policies that recognize the importance of gender equality. A lot has been done, as I said. Key challenges still remain, and a few have been recognized in the introductory session this morning. Gender-based violence, still very up there as a challenge for our region, whilst the global statistics tell us that 1 in 3 women in their lifetime would have suffered some sort of violence. In the Pacific, it's 2 out of 3 Pacific women. It is a challenge that affects every sector of our economies. Women in leadership, again, on the international stage, we're looking at about 27% of women in parliaments. In the Pacific, outside of Australia and New Zealand, we're sitting at 7%. And when it comes to leadership, the importance of leadership on everything that we do as a country, it's an area that needs to be addressed as a priority. Women's economic empowerment, lower labor force participation for women. A lot of our Pacific women work in the informal sector. The need to put into place policies and programs that address the unique needs and challenges that women in the economic sector face is a key challenge. Lower level of access to digital economy, one of the key pillars of the Pact for the Future. And the gendered impact of that is not lost on us as a region as we grapple with emerging technology-facilitated gender-based violence, for example. These are 3 key challenges, and I'll stop there, given the limitations we have on time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rakuita, for sharing your insights and the perspectives on the progress made and the challenges that still lie ahead. You noted the 4 most notable challenges. At the same time, we heard that you send a strong message that gender equality should not be seen as a standalone goal. It has to be integrated as the overall economic and social development. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Ms. Hannah Brixey, Global Director on Gender, World Bank. She leads the World Bank's global efforts to advance gender equality, and most recently, direct the development of the World Bank Group Gender Strategy 2024 to 2030. Ms. Brixey, the World Bank has promoted gender equality through advancing human development, economic opportunities, public financing, among others. From this perspective, what areas are lagging the furthest behind, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region? And where have you seen the greatest progress? Yeah.
Thank you so much, and delighted to be here. For the World Bank Group, this is really a historic moment. The level of ambition to accelerate gender equality is truly historic, but also recognition that this is not easy, and indeed, as speakers and here Madame Raquita illustrated, there are many remaining challenges. So first, let me, however, make the case based on evidence how important it is for governments and for countries to make progress toward gender equality. From the evidence we have, we see that on average, income per capita would be 20% higher if women could be employed at the same rate as men. We see from evidence that to end poverty, countries need to unleash the potential of women. Now, progress has been made. In this region, we see a lot of progress in education. In fact, girls are in many countries in the region doing better than boys, and not only in reading, but also in science and math. Progress also has been in health. Maternal health mortality has decreased significantly in most countries in the region. But where countries are lagging behind is, I would highlight 3 areas. One is the participation of women in productive jobs, well-paying jobs, jobs of the future, including in science, technology, engineering, and the digital sector. Second, women building their business. There are a lot of women entrepreneurs, but they are still facing a lot of barriers in their effort to expand their business. And the third area is the participation of women in decision-making. We see across the Asia-Pacific region that women are not represented adequately in decision-making, and this is true at the community level in most countries. It is true in the private sector, and it is also true in the public sector. And we see from evidence that when women participate in decision-making, in fact, everyone benefits. We have recently had a report on disaster risk management, and we see that when women participate at the national level and at the community level in the decision-making, in the development of disaster risk management plans and in their implementation, the results are much better and the whole community benefits. Another example, food security. We see from evidence that in many countries, I would say Cambodia, for example, or Vietnam, many women are participating as farmers, but because of the constraints they are facing, their output per land is significantly lower. So by addressing these constraints, by including women in planning and decision-making about agriculture policies, about agriculture extension services, about outreach to women farmers, the results for the entire agriculture sector could be better. So these are some examples of why is it important to address the remaining constraints. And let me conclude that, as I said, the World Bank Group Gender Strategy is truly the most ambitious ever, and there are 3 key objectives. The first is to improve foundational well-being for everyone, for women and girls and everyone. That means efforts to end gender-based violence and elevate human capital, including in areas such as science, technology, engineering, and math. Second, objective to expand and enable economic opportunities, so better and more jobs for women, better access to economic assets such as land or mobile phone, and enabling services. In here, I would highlight child care and elderly care. In many countries in the regions, the lack of affordable and quality care services really limits the participation of women in the economy and in leadership and in decision making. And three, our third objective is to engage women as leaders and work with governments and with private sectors to develop the opportunities to bring women into decision making. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Brixie. And we heard loudly from you that we need to keep the ambition high, and we need to keep all the momentum, at the same time taking a very pragmatic approach to tackle those constraints. Yeah, so now I would like to introduce Ms. Nala Amira, founder and advisor, Green Welfare Indonesia. Ms. Amira is a climate activist based in Japan and the founder of Green Welfare Indonesia, an organization driving eco-social action through climate action and education, community empowerment, and a nature-based solution. She's also a part of Young Women's inaugural 30 for 2030 cohort. Ms. Amira, your work focuses on climate education for young women leaders. What are the biggest impacts of climate change for young women and girls? And what barriers do they face to being involved in climate change, related decision making, and the solutions? Yeah, the floor.
Thank you so much, Ms. Yang. It's an honor to be here to represent many young female leaders, especially in sustainability. We've seen a lot of progress when it comes to young women being involved in climate efforts. And I've heard so many powerful stories from young women over the last couple of days on how climate change has disproportionately affected them, especially in rural and agricultural dominant countries. For rural communities, when climate change disrupts farming activities that are usually led by women and young girls, droughts, floods, and soil degradation, it doesn't just impact crops, but it destabilizes the whole social economic foundation of entire families, especially for young women and young female farmers. Economically, it deepens poverty and insecurity, and socially, emphasized a lot by marginalized communities, is an increase in child marriages, displacement, and migration. In times of economic stress, like the climate crisis, child marriage is perceived as a coping strategy, a way to relieve a financial burden of the family. And the number of girls facing the double challenge of climate change and early marriage could rise by 33% by 2050. This is an intersectional crisis we can't afford to ignore. Structural gender roles further make this issue even worse. Young women are pulled out of school to support farming duties. They miss out on education and skills like STEM and leadership training that could help them break out of the cycle and empower them to access emerging technologies or pursue leadership roles. Without targeted intervention, this cycle continues. Rural young women remain trapped in economic vulnerability and are unable to break free from low productivity agriculture roles. They lose out on chances to create better opportunities for themselves, their families, and their communities. In urban areas, from my work, I learned that a lot of young girls in suburban areas especially experience school dropout during times of crisis. Similar to rural young female farmers, they are pulled out of school to assist in household responsibilities because of economic hardships. And even outside this, while urban areas might offer slightly better access to education, the challenges for young women remain significant. Everyday struggles like reduced productivity and mobility due to climate change take a toll. Imagine the effects of girls who have to walk further or long commutes to school or to work, especially in vulnerable economic sectors. And even when young women in the urban areas pursue education, they often find themselves excluded from political and decision-making spaces because there is a divide in climate governance. We see a lot of emerging young women leading grassroots and community efforts, but in high-level climate decision-making, there is a huge gap in women leading decision-making, let alone young women. The Women's Environment and Development Organization revealed something that should concern us all. At my first COP last year, at COP28, just 34% of party delegates were women, with only 19% being head of delegates. Imagine the numbers of young climate negotiators. and only 2% of country delegations had equal numbers of men and women. This was the same percentage as 10 years ago. It is a huge barrier, and we need to start seeing young women not just as an afterthought in climate talks. My last point will be climate funding, something that is being discussed right now at COP29. One big issue that has been iterated over and over is, of course, the lack of accessible and flexible funding schemes for climate projects. Not enough money is going into the right programs or for the right needs, and young women constantly need to compete for funding. And at many times, they don't have complete ownership and accountability of outcomes of their own climate projects. Despite these barriers, young women are leading the efforts for climate and sustainability, and I look forward to discussing further solutions of what governments and other partners can effectively develop this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Amira, for those voices from the youth, and also for noting the barriers that young women and girls face to influence climate change crisis and in the decision making. So we know that in our region, and still over half of the world's youth and the children residing in the Asia and the Pacific, they could be the agent of change, they could be the voices. So with this, I would like to move to the second round of the discussion, and let me turn back to each of you for further exploration. Ms. Rakuita, as we look ahead towards the advancement of the Beijing Platform for Action, what action would you suggest prioritizing to accelerate progress towards gender equality and the women empowerment, particularly in the context of the Pact of the Future, which was just concluded in September in New York, and tapping into the potential of emerging opportunities? You have the floor.
Thank you, moderator. The actions are many, but I'd like to focus on one critical pathway that I feel that we haven't really tapped into as a region. And we've heard about this in many different narratives, integrating gender considerations into governance systems that shape our lived realities day in and day out. And I would like to unpack this very briefly in the Pacific sense. What does it look like? Pacific people are relational people. Relationships matter to us. We are communal people. Communities are key to our well-being. And when we talk about Pacific values, even though our cultures are diverse over the biggest ocean of the world, there are key principles, key values that unite us as a people. And I'd like to hone in on two in particular that can drive gender equality for us as a region. That's unity and stewardship. As Pacific people, we rally together as communities, as villages, to achieve common goals. As stewards of our Blue Pacific, we are accountable as a collective for the well-being of each individual in our community, and also for the less of us, for each and every one in our communities. These key values are common to us as a people, no matter how diverse our cultures are. And these are key values that shape human rights principles on an international level. But when you bring human rights language to us, we don't really understand it. As a Pacific people, it's important for us to unpack human rights values in things that we know, that's weaved into our DNA, that we are born into as Pacific people, principles that already exist in our communities. And going back to these values is so key when we're acting together to deliver for gender equality. What we need to do is to identify key societal pillars in our Pacific region that shape our lived realities, our worldviews about everything that touch our lives. And I'd like to name a few of these key pillars: governance and governance structures, whether it's traditional or non-traditional; culture, religion or faith that shape everything that we do in our communities; and of course, men. Influential pillars that affect us day in and day out. So it's important to unpack these key pillars in our societies and how we can integrate gender considerations into their core and use these pillars to be agents of change. Make them mobilize for gender equality. I think until we are able to do that, to identify pillars that influence everything that we do, we will be here again in 5 years talking about the same issues. We need to go back to what we know, how we know, the Pacific way of knowing and doing, which I feel is often not emphasized enough in the way we address things. So to really just briefly unpack what that looks like in a government, mobilizing collectively to look at our policies, our programs in integrating core gender considerations into every sector. One simple question I'm always asking, look at your national budgets. How much are you investing for women's empowerment in national women's machinery, and beyond that, in your sectoral budgets? How much are you investing? When you unpack that in the cultural sense, culture is usually seen as a barrier to gender equality. I beg to differ. There are positive expressions of culture that can mobilize positively for gender equality. Because of this narrative we have that it's a barrier, we haven't really unpacked the positive influences of culture that can mobilize for gender equality. It's time to start unpacking that. So, bottom line is, for me, it comes down to 3 words: unity, mobilizing together as a collective, stewardship, being accountable for each individual in your community, influence, using societal pillars that influence your worldviews to mobilize and be agents of change for gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rakuita, for such a passionate intervention and comments. I believe that your voice from the Pacific community is loudly heard. We have such a good audience with good listeners. So we feel that I would like to just add one key word to what you mentioned. In addition to the unity, in addition to the mobilization, I would like to add solidarity. Yeah, with this, I now give the floor to our next panelist, Ms. Brixie. Going forward, what recommendations do you have for governments acting in partnership with the development banks and other stakeholders to further promote gender equality? What concrete action can be taken to advance gender equality in the next 5 years? It's a long range. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So the advice number 1, based on evidence for all governments, is to recognize that advancing gender equality is the right thing to do, and it is the smart thing to do. And I shared some insights. The evidence is absolutely clear, whether it's poverty reduction, growth, improving food security, or making climate action more effective. All the results are better when women have equal participation in decision-making and equal participation overall. Second, what governments can do immediately is, number 1, to identify the gender dimensions in all policies and in all sectors, whether it's agriculture or jobs policies. We see that it is not sufficient to just assume that policies will work for everyone the same way. It is very important to identify the gender barriers and address the gender barriers. So, for example, I mentioned earlier the example of food security. To employ women in agriculture extension services, the evidence is very clear. This is a low-cost solution, and immediately women farmers have much better access to information, to fertilizer, to seeds, to decision-making about and information about crops to plant, when there are more women employed in agriculture extension services. So that's one, identify and address the gender dimensions in all policies. And second, to analyze and what specific gender equality outcomes are most urgent to prioritize. We heard Madame Raquita speaking about gender-based violence in the Pacific Islands. And indeed, there are countries where gender-based violence, it's not only a tragedy for the women and for their families and for their children, but it is actually a huge constraint on the entire community, on the well-being in the community, and on economic participation, on economic activity. So there are macroeconomic consequences of gender-based violence. That means even ministers of finance and ministers of planning need to consider addressing and prevention of gender-based violence as a national priority. Now, let me give you a few examples how the World Bank Group is supporting governments and more broadly countries. So it is a lot with the analysis, with the evidence to equip governments in their own decision making, but then it is also programs that are especially effective. One example is childcare, early child development and more broadly childcare, plus elderly care. We see that childcare, when there's quality and affordable, improves the outcomes for children in their development, generates good jobs in the economy, especially for women, and also empowers other women. There are very good examples, recent projects supported by the World Bank, for example, in Vietnam as part of the industrial park development. In elderly care, there are excellent examples now shown by Japan that other countries can learn from. The World Bank is supporting similar approaches, for example, in China. Second program, very effective, social protection. When we think about public works that can involve women, when we think about cash transfers that go into the hands of women with information on how to support child development, how to support their nutrition, and also with assistance and services to improve the livelihoods of women so that women are able to start generating more income. So this is called so-called cash plus approach to safety nets, where safety nets really starts to work as a springboard for economic activity and more revenues for women and their households. Some good examples certainly in the Philippines and in Indonesia. The next area I would suggest supporting entrepreneurships. Governments can do more on leveling the playing field for women entrepreneurs, for example, through procurement systems to expand the access for women-led businesses, whether it's public procurement or private procurement, and cost-effective initiatives such as personal initiative training, or training in financial institutions so that women-led businesses have the same access to opportunities, including financing. And finally, when it comes to supporting decision-making, I would share the example of India, where the combination of quotas and capacity building for women at the community level is expanding the participation of women in decision-making at the community and village level. Good examples in the energy sector, where governments advise and encourage utilities in energy and also in water to involve women in decision-making at the local level. Now building on the evidence that the services are better quality and better coverage when women participate in decision-making. So again, these are some opportunities also supported by the World Bank, such as the We Power partnership, that is making a difference in expanding participation of decision-making of women in the energy sector. So to conclude, the governments have huge opportunities, and the World Bank is supporting governments and countries with data, with evidence, and on prioritizing programs and investments that can make most difference. But as Madame Raquita said, it takes a collective action, and governments need to partner also with the private sector, of course, and also with influencers to engage men and boys so that norms can change, mindsets can change, and really there is a universal recognition that gender equality benefits all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brixie, For our final question, Ms. Amira, how can governments and other partners engage youth more effectively to address the impacts of climate change and other changes facing the region? You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Ms. Yang. There were a lot of strategies we discussed when it comes to climate change and youth involvement, especially in the Asia Pacific. But one thing that we can agree is that we need to break down the systematic barriers, the gaps, and create new pathways to really empower young people from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. My first point would be to integrate multidimensional and intergenerational capacity building, starting with environmental education. From where I come, environmental education is still not mainstream into our formal curriculum. And so we need to make climate-smart education a part of all levels of learning and also approach education and skill building from multiple angles. For example, for rural young farmers, this can mean hybrid learning, combining learning environmental education at school with, let's say, safe and accessible digital learning at home as well. This way, they can continue supporting their families while also getting the education they need. It helps them stay engaged in school, reduces dropout rates because of accessibility, and ensures they learn both modern techniques and traditional wisdom passed on from their ancestors that can make their farming practices more resilient. This also means involving young women and marginalized groups to be ready to implement replicable solutions for the challenges they face every day. They already know the problem, and when they're steered to be involved in decision-making and implementation, the solutions are always effective. We need to build on youth's existing knowledge and help them become more productive and resilient. At the same time, at the urban level, we need to make sure that young women actually deeply connect and truly experience how climate change is affecting their local communities so they can meaningfully advocate for their communities on the global stage like climate negotiations. To make this all happen, we need more young women in leadership roles who understand both the technical and social sides of climate change solutions. Governments and partners, I invite you all to develop more specific skills program for different roles in climate spaces like innovation, policy, advocacy, or even journalism. Training programs could focus on leadership, technical expertise, and effective communication programs because many young women and youth in general lack the training or confidence to step into leadership roles in the first place. My second point will be to build multi-level funding and co-created solutions. It's not that young people lack great ideas, or it's not about one idea being better than another. The challenge lies in the lack of support and resources that young people face when trying to turn their vision into credible, impactful programs. We need to have more dedicated youth funding mechanisms from governments, private sectors, and we also need to have more extensive mapping of marginalized and youth projects because we need to identify clearly what works, where resources are needed most, and most importantly, we need to create an accountability system where the funders and youth recipients create the system. To tie the last points, governments must not limit youth and gender-focused strategies to a single national gender action plan. It needs to be integrated into every ministry's long-term plans. Companies should also do the same. Their CSR programs should further prioritize gender equity and youth empowerment. My last point would be flexibility. We talk a lot about green jobs. We talk about young women getting involved in green jobs, but the reality is that many young women, especially those in double-income households or those who marry in their early to mid-20s, face a difficult choice: advancing their careers or staying home to take care of their children. This dilemma is even more challenging in fields like green jobs that require high skill levels and long-term commitment. To change this, we need to offer more flexible work options, things like adjustable works, remote works, job sharing. These options are key to helping young women enter and stay in industries like green jobs and continue their education in graduate school. In addition to flexibility, we also need to increase scholarships and stipends that can ease the financial burdens that often prevent young women from pursuing higher education in sustainability or full-time green jobs. These changes are especially and essentially for supporting women-led climate solutions in STEMs. So while we focus on creating opportunities like education, funding, leadership that we've talked about, flexibility addresses what happens after young women enter these spaces. It ensures that they're not forced to choose between contributing to climate solutions and fulfilling their family roles. Young people are already understanding the challenges and have innovative solutions. Many are already leading impactful youth movements, and we have hundreds of young people, young female leaders leading in their own communities right now. But they need consistent support, access to resources, and platforms to amplify and scale their efforts. We invite all governments, companies, and organizations to thrive even deeper for systematic change within the youth movement. Lastly, we also need to recognize the power of intergenerational collaboration, like what Ms. Rakrita has mentioned about collective action. We also need intergenerational collaboration. There must be more hand-to-hand intergenerational exchanges. We can learn from the traditions and the generations before us, and we need to know about the guidance and the community-driven knowledge that they have, mentorship and connections, while young leaders bring fresh energy and innovation. The most impactful solutions will only emerge when we work together across generations, sectors, and boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Amira. And I think this is a great note to end the panel discussion. Allow me to thank you to each of the panelists for their insightful comments. And I thank you for reminding us of the sense of urgency. I thank you for providing the sober assessment of the opportunities as well as challenges ahead. I also thank you for those solution and impact-oriented comments and intervention. Last but not least, I thank you for depicting us a picture of hope and solidarity. So please give a warm round of applause to all the panelists for their wonderful comments. Thank you so much. Now I pass the floor back to the chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Young, and panelists for the discussion which has enriched the conference. This concludes the high-level panel discussion. Now, Excellencies, distinguished guests, delegates, I will now open the floor for country statement. I would like to urge all speakers to adhere to the time limit of 5 minutes for government with a head of delegation at the ministerial level for just minister. 4 minutes for all other government heads of delegations, and 3 minutes for intergovernmental organizations, the UN bodies and specialized agencies, and civil society organizations, to ensure we can hear from all those participating. Please do understand, I will be a little bit rough in conducting this conference, but we need to understand the time limit, please, especially for ministers to do understand. If we allow all people to speak, it would be, fair for all. It's like gender equality is a process where all are engaged. The same for the speech. So everybody would like to speak, so please do understand. Delegation call open will speak from their seat. You don't have to move. The Secretariat has received speaking requests, and we will also call on governments in the room who raise their flag. I will first open the floor to statements from members, associate members, and observers countries. I will then invite statements from intergovernmental organizations, United Nations entities, and civil society representatives and other stakeholders. So now I open the floor for statement. I would like to invite distinguished minister. No. I would like to invite the distinguished delegate of Pacific Island Forum, Excellency Lord Vaea, Chair Pacific Island Forum. Please, you have the floor, followed by Lao People Democratic Republic, Excellency Madame Ali Vongyu Buntham. So please, Excellency Lord Vaea, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, I bring warm greetings from the Pacific Island Forum, a regional bloc of 18 member countries dedicated to fostering a vision of peace, harmony, security, gender equality, social inclusion, and prosperity to our people, can lead free, healthy, safe, and productive lives. In 2025, the world will celebrate 30 years since the adoption of the Beijing Platform for Action, a groundbreaking policy agenda aimed at recognizing women's human rights, achieving gender equality, and empowering women globally. It is a pivotal moment for us as a global community and as Asia-Pacific region to reflect on how we have progressed and to challenge ourselves to continue to improve the lives of women and girls in their diversity in our own countries and the region. Our Pacific leaders remain committed to progressing gender equality and social inclusion through the revitalized Pacific Leaders Gender Equality Declaration and the Pacific Platform for Action on Gender Equality and Women's Human Rights. These commitments are reinforced for the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent, which captures our collective vision and aspirations as one Blue Pacific, including the participation and empowerment of our Pacific women and girls in all their diversity. The Pacific has made significant progress in addressing gender equality and social inclusion. It is reported that Pacific women's participation in business leadership has significantly increased and continues to exceed global averages. There are various initiatives, both regional and within countries, that promote the full and equal participation of women and girls in leadership at all levels and across all sectors. The region is also making substantial progress in women and girls education, with most of our Pacific countries achieving gender parity, but we need to prioritize early childhood development and support more women and girls at the tertiary level. Our region continues to work towards strengthened policies and measures to address poverty and promote women's economic empowerment by extending parental leave allowances and implementing social protection policies that are gender responsive and socially inclusive. Despite this progress, significant challenges remain. Sexual and gender-based violence remains a grave concern. Despite legal and policy frameworks in place, there is a high prevalence of all forms of sexual and gender-based violence, including family violence. Prevention and access to services recognizing emerging concerns such as technology-facilitated gender-based violence is a must when addressing gender-based violence. Climate change remains a single threat to the livelihood, security, and well-being of the Pacific. Women and girls in rural, remote, and maritime areas are susceptible to extreme climate environmental events, because they heavily depend on natural resources for their livelihoods. More so, women and girls with disabilities are often disproportionately affected. Sexual and reproductive health and cancer screening, taking into consideration health-related nuclear legacy issues, is a priority for our region. For all Pacific peoples to lead free, healthy, and productive lives, we must ensure universal health coverage for all Pacific peoples, including women and girls in their all diversity. To meet our Sustainable Development Goals, we acknowledge that the participation of Pacific women and girls are central to this. We also recognize that we cannot achieve our leaders' vision as espoused in the 250 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent without the support and cooperation of all our partners. Your Excellencies, I thank you.
Thank you for keeping the time, Excellency. Thank you so much. So now I would like to invite the distinguished delegate of Lao People Democratic Republic, Madam the President of Lao Women Union and Vice Standing President of National Commission for the Advancement of Women, Mothers and Children. You have the floor, you have 5 minutes, followed by Noru, the distinguished delegate Noru. So please, Noru, be prepared.
Madam Chair, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, on behalf of the Lao PDR, I would like to express my highest appreciation and gratitude to the United Nations for organizing the ASEAN Pacific Ministerial Conference on the Beijing+30 review. Madam Chair, since 1995, Lao PDR has been fully committed to implementing the Beijing Declaration and platform for action to promote gender equality and empower women and girls. This is one of the top priorities in advancing nation effort to empower women and men in own share of political, economic, social, cultural, and family rights. The Gender Gap report in 2024 showed gender equality index the 0.7. Enhancing women economic empowerment by improving the legal system applications, reducing obstacles to business growth, trade costs, and enhancing business units and easing credit for SME enterprise in each sector. Women-owned business account for 48.37%, provide vocational training and technical skills for farmers and poor people. Over the past 10 years, the female labor force participation rate increased from 241.9% and the employment rate increased to 54.2%. Adopted the social protection strategy in 2020 to provide equality and universal social protection service. In the education and sports sector have put in place specific mentor and pilot programs, such as providing scholarship to poor students and any girls in rural areas, providing school lunch program, building dormitory for students, project and on developing the quality of education and sport in poor district and provide the mobile teacher projects. Enhancing healthcare service
by prioritizing the development of infrastructure, optimizing human resources, and modernizing the medical equipment. Strengthening its national mechanism for assisting women and girls who are victims of violence by adopting to no wrong door approach, ensuring that victim and assist essential. I would like to reiterate the Lao government's commitment to the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action to achieve gender equality and women empowerment, the girls towards the implementation of NSEDP and the National Action Plan for Gender Equality in 2026 and 2030. I wish for this ASEAN Pacific Ministerial Conference on Beijing +30 review to have great success. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Excellency. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegates of Nauru. Please, Nauru, you have the floor, and followed by Fiji. Fiji, be prepared. So please, Nauru, the Minister for Women's and Social Development Affairs, please, you have the floor.
Distinguished Chair, Excellencies, Honorable Delegates, Samo Yoran. Firstly, congratulating all of us for arriving at the 30th anniversary since the historical meeting in Beijing, China. I pay homage to all the women's human rights defenders, both women and men, who have come and gone, whether in blessed memory or in a different field, from government machineries of women movements, crop agencies, to development partners, to the grassroots level. I salute all of us in arriving at this important juncture in history. Nauru aligns itself with the statement delivered by the Kingdom of Tonga on behalf of the Pacific Island Forum countries. Nauru is acutely aware of the challenges faced by women and girls in our region, particularly in the areas of education, health, economic participation, and political leadership. However, we remain committed to fulfilling the promises made under the BPA. Since the adoption of the BPA in 1995, Nauru has made significant strides in ensuring full participation of women in public and private life. We have enacted legislative measures, developed policies, and established programs that align with the 12 critical areas of concern in the BPA. Where Nauru has prioritized the improvement of women and girls' access to health services, with a particular focus on maternal health and family planning. We have strengthened our healthcare infrastructure and continue to work towards the reduction of maternal and child mortality rates. We have recently formed 2 health divisions to be separate standalone departments, making it easier for accountability. In education, Nauru has achieved gender parity in primary and secondary school enrollment, ensuring girls have equal access to quality education, which is vital for future opportunities. Nauru has taken steps to integrate women into the economic development process. We have encouraged female participation in the workforce, particularly in sectors like public service and small-scale enterprises. Efforts are ongoing to promote entrepreneurship among women and to ensure access to financial resources and markets. However, we acknowledge that there is much more to be done to break down the barriers to economic independence for women, especially in the districts and communities. Nauru has seen an increase in the representation of women in leadership roles, including in government and public office. While progress has been made, we recognize that women remain underrepresented in decision-making processes as political candidates. We are working in supporting women's political participation and leadership through training programs and mentoring. The elimination of gender-based violence remains a critical priority for Nauru. We have introduced legal frameworks to protect women from domestic violence, and we are continuing to strengthen our support services for our survivors. I have and will continue to reiterate that the people of Nauru must know the laws that govern them, so that while we do our part in terms of visibility, the responsibility is a holistic approach where the people must make every effort to know these laws themselves for their own safety, development, and well-being. One of the key priorities for Nauru is the strengthening of gender-responsive governance at all levels. This involves ensuring that gender equality is fully integrated into policy making, budgeting, and program implementation. We have in February this year endorsed gender-responsive budgeting and gender mainstreaming across all government processes. We will work with our regional partners to build capacity and share best practices in gender-responsive governance, which is essential for achieving sustainable development for all. As an island nation, Nauru is particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and we will continue to push for the integration of gender considerations into climate change policies. We have completed and will be endorsing the Enabling Gender-Responsive and Inclusive Responses to Climate Change, Disaster, and Pandemic Policy, which speaks to the issues we see as an existential threat and the collaborative mechanisms that can facilitate responses. In the face of ongoing economic challenges and the global uncertainty brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic, Nauru is committed to ensuring the social protection systems are inclusive and responsive to the needs of women, particularly those in vulnerable situations. We are pleased to have a strong social protection system in place for our children, disabled elderly, as well as special circumstances for women in domestic violence situations. In concluding, Chair, I would like us to ensure that we abide by the tenets of the promise that was made 30 years ago. In pushing for transformative change, proper measures grounded in effective political will and strong systems and processes are urgently needed. Nauru remains committed to taking bold and transformative actions to ensure that the priorities of the BPA are fully realized for all women and girls in Nauru and across our two regions. I thank you, Matabakar.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from Nauru. Now, the next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate of Fiji, Excellency Minister for Women, Children and Social Protection. Please, you have the floor. Be prepared, Samoa.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Bula Vinaka. Fiji stands here today to reflect on the 30 years of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and to challenge ourselves to address what remains unfinished. While progress has been made, the bold promise of equality, dignity, and opportunity for women and girls is yet to be fully realized. In Fiji, we have made important strides. Female students now comprise 57% of graduates in tertiary institutions. We've enacted gender-sensitive legislation and policies, bolstered maternal health services, and witnessed a growing recognition of the need to address gender-based violence reflected in increased reporting. At the heart of these achievements are women's rights organizations, steadfast champions of justice, equity, and accountability, who have tirelessly fought to protect and advance the rights of all women and girls. While these accomplishments mark progress, the challenge lies in translating these into meaningful change for all women and girls. Education must not only unlock potential, but also must lead to tangible equality, ensuring women's full participation in the formal economy, fair access to financial, digital, and technical resources, and a strong presence in leadership roles across all sectors of society. Yet, significant barriers persist. Patriarchy and deeply ingrained discriminatory social norms continue to constrain the roles and opportunities of Fijian women and girls. The burden of unpaid care and domestic work continues to fail or fall disproportionately on their shoulders, confining many to informal and low-paying economic activities that provide little security or recognition. Too many Fijian women and girls continue to face gender-based violence. Equally pressing is the limited access to sexual and reproductive health and rights, which hinders the care, choices, and autonomy. Madam Chair, in this context, Fiji recognizes the critical need to address a web of interconnected challenges to progress towards gender equality. This involves boosting economic empowerment, safeguarding bodily autonomy, enhancing sexual and reproductive health and rights, recognizing the importance of unpaid care work, encouraging women's participation in the formal economy and leadership positions, robustly combating gender-based violence, and confronting the extensive challenges of the climate crisis, all simultaneously and in parallel. Within this framework, Fiji's commitment is demonstrated through 4 key evidence-based, transformative whole-of-government and whole-of-population flagship initiatives. 1. Gender data and statistics. Our first ever Fiji country gender assessment, launched in 2023, equips us with a clear picture of where we stand and where we need to go. 2. The National Action Plan to Prevent Violence Against All Women and Girls reflects Fiji's unwavering commitment to addressing gender-based violence at its root, which is patriarchy. We recognize that Fijian women and girls, in all their diversity, cannot be truly safe until they achieve equality with men and boys, with equal access to resources and opportunities. 3. Women's Economic Empowerment National Action Plan, or WENAP, builds on extensive consultations carried out in 2024. This plan will launch in March 2025. By emphasizing on legislative reforms, equal access to resources, fair recognition of unpaid care work, and resilience in the face of climate challenges, the WENAP aims to create concrete pathways for all women and girls. 4. Gender-responsive planning and budgeting ensures that our commitments to gender equality are backed by real financial investment through the national budget. Without proper budget allocations and policies, these remain empty promises. In February of 2024, we initiated the design of a 5-year gender equality accountability initiative to track and ensure that our policies, programs, and budgets across all government agencies and sectors are effectively implemented with a gender-responsive approach. Chair, Fiji recognizes that the promises of Beijing 1995 cannot be fulfilled by maintaining the status quo. We must critically examine our financial and technical partnerships for gender equality has to be structured and delivered. Too often, these efforts are undermined by ineffective leadership, inadequate technical expertise, glossy reports, weak accountability, and initiatives that fail to reflect the lived realities and needs of our local communities. On this note and in conclusion, Fiji is committed to advancing the implementation of the Beijing Platform for Action with renewed focus and determination.
Thank you, distinguished delegates of Fiji. Now, may I invite the distinguished delegate of Samoa to please take the floor, followed by Turkmenistan. Please, Turkmenistan, be prepared. You have the floor, Excellency.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, Talofa lava, and warm Pacific greetings. Samoa proudly aligns with the Pacific region in presenting this statement. We celebrate the progress achieved under the Beijing Declaration and reaffirm our strong commitment to addressing ongoing challenges. Rooted in the Samoa, Samoa's values of faith, family, and community, guided by respect, dignity, love, protection, and service, continue to shape our nation's vision for gender equality and social inclusion. These values strengthen our collective responsibility and reinforce our belief that a whole-of-society approach with a whole-of-government response can make all the difference. Samoa has achieved significant milestones in advancing gender equality and fostering inclusive development, inclusive grassroots leadership. The district development program spans 51 districts, benefiting over 53,918 households, with 20% of each district's annual 1 million tala dedicated to gender equality and social inclusion. The program mandates 50% women's representation and a youth representation in councils, ensuring decision reflects the needs of all. Women in leadership. The historical election of Honorable Fiamē Naomi Mataafa as the Pacific's first female Prime Minister highlights our progress. Women now hold 43% of senior management roles and 56.7% of senior executive roles in the public sector. Policies such as the National Policy for Gender Equality, the Family Safety Policy, and the Polapui National Prevention Framework underscores Samoa's commitment to equity and safety. Education and economic empowerment. While 79.1% of women aged 25 plus have attained secondary education, economic disparities persist. Targeted programs under the DDP and the Pathway for the Development of Samoa address these gaps, empowering women through entrepreneurship, vocational training, and financial literacy. Samoa transformative priorities. First, investing in children. Children are central to Samoa's vision for sustainable development, guided by faith and family. Policies such as the Child Protection Policy and early childhood programs focus on nurturing values, advancing early learning, and protecting children's rights to ensure they thrive in safe and supportive environments. Second, ending violence against women and children. Samoa refuses to accept violence as a norm. Rooted in community care, the Polapui Prevention Framework and Family Safety Policy prioritize prevention, survivor support, and public awareness, complemented by trained counselors and responsive system to promote safety and respect for all. Third, inclusive governance. The DDP ensures 50% of women's representation and youth inclusion in decision-making, reflecting Samoa's dedication to inclusive governance. With the National Policy for Gender Equality, Samoa continues to advance women and girls in leadership roles across government, business, and communities. Economic empowerment. Economic empowerment is vital to breaking cycles of inequality, guided by community-driven approaches under the BDS, Pathway for the Development of Samoa, initiative focusing on financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and vocational training enable women to lead and thrive economically. Call for collaboration. Samoa calls on regional and global partners to join hands in mobilizing resources, aligning strategies, and driving collective action. Rooted in faith, strengthened by family, and united as a community, we aim to shape a future where every child, women, and family thrives. As the saying goes, if what I see is all I see, then all I see is me. But if what I see is all we see, then we see hope, change, and opportunity. Whawhetai and God bless.
Thank you to all previous speakers for keeping time. Thank you so much. So thank you, distinguished delegate of Samoa. Now, may I invite the distinguished delegate of Turkmenistan, Excellency Chairwoman of the Central Council of the Women Union of Turkmenistan, and followed by Iran. Iran, please be prepared.
Здравствуйте, уважаемые участники конференции, дамы и господа. Разрешите все приветствовать и выразить благодарность организаторам за предоставленную возможность выступить. 29 лет назад представители 180 государств в Пекине на 4-й Всемирной конференции по положению женщин единогласно приняли Пекинскую декларацию и платформу действия, ставших дорожной картой в деле обеспечения гендерного равенства. Наши страны, приняв Пекинскую декларацию и платформы действия, взяли на себя обязательства по реализации положения данного документа. Уважаемые участники, государственная забота о женщинах – признак здоровья общества, его гуманности и нравственности, а личное внимание к этому вопросу со стороны президента страны – гарант успешного осуществления принятых соответствующих программ, а значит и достижения большинства целей устойчивого развития. Сегодня женщины в Туркменистане широко представлены в структурах государственной власти. Так, из числа 125 депутатов парламента Туркменистана 32 женщины, что составляет 26% от общего числа депутатов. У нас женщины наравне с мужчинами участвуют как в управлении делами государства, так и внешнеполитической деятельности. Спикер парламента страны, заместитель, председатель Кабинета министров, омбудсмен, постоянный представитель Туркменистана при ООН и ответственный секретарь Национальной комиссии Туркменистана по делам ЮНЕСКО женщины. Уважаемые господа, Туркменистан последовательно реализует положение Конвенции о ликвидации всех форм дискриминации в отношении женщин и Пекинской декларации и платформы действия 1995 года, обеспечить женщине осуществление и пользование правами человека и основами, свободами на основе гендерного равенства с мужчинами. В настоящее время реализуется национальный план действия по гендерному равенству в Туркменистане на 2021-2025 году. Определяющие стратегические цели по обеспечению гендерного равенства в различных аспектах государственной и общественной жизни. Эффективная реализация задач в области гендерной политики в Туркменистане получила широкое признание международной общественности. Подтверждение этому служит избранный Туркменистан в состав Исполнительного совета структуры ООН по вопросам гендерного равенства и расширения прав и возможностей женщин на 2022 и 2024 году. Хочу добавить, что в 2020 году в регион был создан диалог женщин стран Центральной Азии, где Туркменистан успешно представительствовал в 2022 году. Процесс дальнейшего совершенствования гендерной политики Туркменистана ведется в контексте глобальной повестки дня в области устойчивого развития на период до 2030 году. Уважаемые участники конференции, мы уверены, что сегодняшний форум позволит еще большому достижению успешного нашего государства укрепления регионального и международного сотрудничества в целях обеспечения мира, стабильности и устойчивого развития, активного вовлечения женщин в разработке принятой политическое решение, поддержка их участия в социально-экономической, культурной жизни государства. В заключение хочу пожелать всем участникам плодотворной работы, здоровья и благополучия, единства, семья и мир на всей планете. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you, distinguished delegate of Turkmenistan. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate of Iran, and followed by Tuvalu. So Tuvalu, be prepared. So Excellency, the Vice President for Women and Family Affairs from Iran will speak in Persian, but translation is available, please. You have your earphone. So, please, Excellency, you have the floor. Iran.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. سلام. امروز در این نشست وزرایی محترم به مناسبت 30مین سالگرد تصویب سند پکن گرد هم آمده ایم تا بر عزم و اراده جمعی خود برای پیشرفت زنان تاکید کنیم. جمهوری اسلامی ایران همواره با توجه به تاکیدات ویژه اسلام و اصول قانون اساسی در این مسیر گام برداشته است. من در جایگاه زنی ایرانی که در ایران متولد شده و به استناد اصل 30 قانون اساسی در همه مقاطع رایگان آموزش دیده و در رشته کارآفرینی تا مقطع دکترا تحصیل کرده، امروز در کسوت مدیر ارشدی که در مسیر توانافزایی دختران جوان و ارتقاء وضعیت زنان کشورم گام برمی‌دارم، در این نشست حاضر شدم تا اذعان دارم به استناد بند 20 و 21 قانون اساسی جمهوری اسلامی ایران، زنان و مردان ایرانی در کنار هم در 45 سال پرفراز و نشیبی که از عمر انقلاب مردمی ما می‌گذرد، با انواع هجمه‌های ناعادلانه و تحریم‌های غیرقانونی و ظالمانه مواجه شده و با تلاش مضاعف توانستند امروز کشور را به رتبه 15 جهانی در تولید علم، رتبه 4 در تولید علم نانو و رتبه 8 در فناوری هوافضا برسانند. خانم‌ها و آقایان، طبق اصل 21 دولت موظف است حقوق زن را در تمام جهات تضمین نماید و در زمینه‌های مساعد برای رشد شخصیت او و احیای حقوق مادی و معنوی او را ایجاد نماید. کشور ما با گسترش سوادآموزی و کاهش شکاف جنسیتی به 3% به یکی از موفق‌ترین کشورهای دنیا در برقراری عدالت جنسی عدالت جنسیتی تبدیل شده است. در آموزش عالی زنان 56% از دانشجویان دانشگاه‌های دولتی رایگان و تحت حمایت دولت را تشکیل می‌دهند و در رشته‌های فنی و مهندسی نیز دسترسی زنان به آموزش افزایش یافته است. امروز 40% از اعضای هیئت علمی دانشگاه‌ها، 60% از جامعه معلمان و 24% از جامعه مخترعان کشور را زنان ایرانی تشکیل می‌دهند. در حوزه بهداشت شاخص امید به زندگی در میان زنان ایرانی به 78 سال رسیده و میزان مرگ و میر مادران به 16 مورد در هر 100,000 زایمان کاهش یافته است. زنان 40% از پزشکان متخصص و 30% از پزشکان فوق تخصص را تشکیل می‌دهند و نرخ مشارکت زنان در فناوری اطلاعات به 31.5% رسیده است. در زمینه مشارکت سیاسی از سال 2017 تا 2022 بیش از 8,000 زن در سراسر کشور توانمند شده و شاهد رشد 227% زنان داوطلب نمایندگی مجلس هستیم. همچنین بیش از 1200 زن قاضی در کشور فعال هستند. دولت 14 توجه ویژه‌ای به حضور زنان، جوانان و اقوام در مناصب سیاستگذاری و تصمیمگیری دارد و در حال حاضر 4 زن در هیئت دولت حضور دارند. ذیل سیاست‌های کلی نظام، خانواده‌ها به ویژه خانواده‌هایی که توسط زنان سرپرستی می‌شوند مورد حمایت دولت قرار دارند. در ارتباط با مهاجران نیز فرآیندهای قانونی برای اخذ شناسنامه برای فرزندان مادران دارای فرزند مشترک با اتباع مهاجر انجام شده است. همچنین برنامه‌های ملی با بودجه مشخص برای توانمندسازی اقتصادی زنان و افزایش دسترسی آنها به منابع طبیعی و خدمات اجتماعی در حال اجراست. طبق اصل 15 سیاست‌های کلی برنامه هفتم پیشرفت جمهوری اسلامی مبنی بر رفع موانع رشد و شکوفایی بانوان، افزایش مهارت‌های شغلی زنان و افزایش سهم زیرساخت‌های شتابدهی نوآوری در حوزه زنان و خانواده به تصویب مجلس رسیده و توسعه کارآفرینی زنان، کارآفرینی اجتماعی و کسب و کارهای خانگی در دستور کار است. همچنین به منظور شناخت تحولات حوزه زنان و خانواده و افزایش کارایی در اقدامات و سیاست‌های مرتبط، اصلاح قوانین و مقررات و بهبود نظام حکمرانی، تهیه اطلس حوزه زنان در دستور کار دولت است. اجلاسی که در آن گرد هم آمده این فرصتی است برای بازبینی تعهدات جهانی نسبت به حقوق بشر، عدالت جنسیتی و حمایت از زنان و کودکان در سراسر جهان. با این حال جای تأسف عمیق است که در 1 سال گذشته شاهد نقض آشکار و رسمی و گسترده اصول این سند بودیم. تنها در 1 سال گذشته هزاران انسان بیگناه در غزه کشته شدند و این فجایع که حقوق بنیادین زنان و دختران را نقض می‌کند در تضاد کامل با اصول کنوانسیون مقام زن است. بیایید در 30مین سالگرد بیانیه پکن صدای قربانیان این نقض آشکار حقوق بشر را به جهان برسانیم و برای عدالت، صلح و پایان اشغالگری گام برداریم.
Thank you, distinguished delegate of Iran. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate of Tuvalu, Excellency Prime Minister Special Envoy for Women, whom I now invite to take the floor, followed by Tonga. Please, Tonga, be prepared.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to take stock and celebrate 30 years of progress of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. In this connection, I'm honored to address you on behalf of the government and people of Tuvalu as the Prime Minister's Special Envoy for Women and Girls. Recently, our Gender Affairs Department was placed under the Prime Minister's office, reflecting our government's priority to advance women's rights and gender equality. Also this year, we conducted a comprehensive review of our progress in implementing the Beijing Platform for Action. While celebrating meaningful progress, we are mindful of the area where further action is needed. During COVID-19, our government took proactive measures to safeguard our people, achieving over 90% vaccination coverage and reporting zero fatalities. This remarkable success not only protected our nation from the worst impacts of the pandemic, but relieved the burden on women who traditionally shoulder much of the caregiving in times of crisis. This achievement is a testament to our commitment to the well-being and resilience of our people, especially women. In education, we have remained resolute in ensuring that girls have equal access and opportunity. Despite challenges in transportation and communications infrastructure, we were able to keep girls in school throughout the pandemic, and they continued to excel academically. Our high retention rate for girls reflect our dedication to nurturing their potential and empowering them to become leaders into Tuvalu's future. Domestic violence remains a challenge, but we are tackling it head-on with the help of civil society. Our annual 16 Days of Activism campaign has raised awareness and fostered a zero-tolerance culture towards violence. Establishing a gender-based violence task force has also helped us improve support services for survivors, although more work is needed. To boost women's economic empowerment, we have initiated women-targeted loans through the Development Bank of Tuvalu and created local market opportunities supporting women's financial independence and entrepreneurship. Additionally, this year we endorsed an updated national gender equity policy, reaffirming our commitment to women's economic inclusion, the elimination of violence, and women's roles in decision-making. Yet, significant challenges persist. Many women still face violence in their homes, constrained by social norms, insufficient services, and gaps in the justice system. Economic and social pressures such as limited job opportunities, high cost of living, and overcrowded housing place immense stress on women. In traditional governance, decision-making remains male-dominated, and regrettably, there are no women currently in our parliament. Tuvalu is at the forefront of the existential threat of climate change. Rising seas threaten our land and our very own existence. While doing our utmost to protect our homeland, we must also prepare ourselves for the worst-case scenario. This includes empowering our youth and women and helping them develop skills to support migration and integrations in neighboring countries if necessary. We are committed to enhancing data collections and monitoring women's experiences to inform effective policies. We will continue to expand reproductive health care and address non-communicable diseases to support women's health and reduce their unpaid care work burdens. We are exploring opportunities in blue and green economies for women's empowerment, seeking housing solutions, and creating social safety nets for vulnerable families. We are also working with communities to shift harmful gender norms and open pathways for women's participation in decision-making. Finally, we recognize the invaluable role of civil society organizations and women's groups in promoting women's human rights and empowering women in all their diversity. By working closely with our community partners, we can leverage expertise, resources, and community support to create lasting change. In closing, Tuvalu reaffirms its commitment to the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, working towards a Tuvalu where gender equality is not just a vision, but a reality for all women and girls. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, distinguished delegate of Tuvalu. I now invite the distinguished delegate of Tonga, Honorable Minister of Internal Affairs, whom I now invite to take the floor, followed by New Zealand.
I bring you warm greetings from the Kingdom of Tonga. and may I take this opportunity to congratulate Madam Chair on taking the chair and to acknowledge the 3 decades of unwavering commitment to advancing gender equality for the Asia-Pacific region. As we prepare to celebrate 30 years of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, Tonga reaffirms her continued commitment to its implementation, just as she committed in 1995 at the unanimous adoption of the Global Blueprint for the Advancing Gender Equality. And I'm proud to share that a member of our current delegation was at the historic adoption 30 years ago. Tonga reaffirms her commitment to the implementation of the Pacific Platform for Action on Gender Equality, the 2050 Strategy for the Blue Pacific Continent, and to revitalize Pacific Leaders' Gender Equality Declaration. In the last 5 years, our government has responded to gaps and challenges related to gender equality by introducing the following policies: education for women in the energy sector, early childhood education and development, children with disability, sexual harassment and GBV in the public service, women's participation in labor mobility schemes, and to provide an enabling environment for mainstreaming gender across government. Legislation was passed to address technology-facilitated gender-based violence, and in 2022, Parliament passed an amendment to the Criminal Offences Act to expand the definition of rape, ensuring a more comprehensive protection for victims. Whilst Tonga has not formally adopted gender-responsive budgeting, the Ministry of Finance is currently undertaking a reform of the Public Financial Management Act and system, which will provide a roadmap on how gender-responsive budgeting is to be implemented across government. Whilst we have made good and steady progress, we continue to face challenges and setbacks. The effects of climate change has caused our country to suffer back-to-back natural disasters, and it remains the biggest existential threat to our security. Despite the first ever increased number of elected women at the last local government election, as well as many other initiatives to increase women's leadership and political representation, women continues to be underrepresented in national boards, commissions, and other decision-making roles. Mainstreaming, coordination, and the implementation of the national gender policy have been stalled due to the lack of relevant capacities across government to implement mainstreaming initiatives such as sex and disability, disaggregated data collection, gender-responsive budgeting, and basic training on core concepts of gender equality. Gender-based violence, sexual reproductive human rights for women and girls, and the stigmatization of unwed mothers remains a challenge. However, as we are working to make Tonga safer and more inclusive through GBV, violence prevention, and initiatives in early childhood development. Strengthened relationship between development partners, the National Women's Machinery, and civil society organizations will ensure that the challenges of coordination are removed. Tonga calls on all partners to support national women's machineries for ensuring that the custodians of gender policies are not overlooked. Madam Chair, strengthening partnership will ensure that women and girls in all their diversity are supported and provided with enabling environment where our people can safely thrive and protect it. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from Tonga. I now invite the distinguished delegate of New Zealand to take the floor. Unfortunately, the Minister for Women, of New Zealand could not make it in person, but she shared a video. So please let us watch the video. However, followed by China, so China be prepared.
Honourable Chair, distinguished ministers, excellencies and esteemed colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to address you all virtually and reaffirm New Zealand's commitment to the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action as we approach the 30-year milestone anniversary in 2025. This is an important moment to reflect on both our successes and the challenges to date across the platform's 12 critical areas of concern and consider the road ahead for the women and girls of the Asia-Pacific region. New Zealand is committed to advancing and protecting the human rights of all women and girls and promoting gender equality for the benefit of all. We know that achieving gender equality will require collective action and cooperation across the entire Asia-Pacific region. That's why New Zealand has endorsed commitments in the revitalised Pacific Leaders Gender Equality Declaration and Pacific Platform for Action on Gender Equality and Women's Human Rights. It's why we continue to work in regional partnerships such as ASEAN and APEC to support gender-inclusive approaches and the empowerment of women. I'm proud of the progress New Zealand has made towards improving outcomes for women and girls. We've worked hard to increase women's representation and leadership across the public sector. Women currently hold nearly 54% of public sector board roles, marking the 4th consecutive year that women's representation on public sector boards has reached 50% or more. In 2022, women members of Parliament gained an equal share of seats in the New Zealand House of Representatives, making us one of only 6 countries in the world to have achieved gender equality in Parliament. Women currently hold 46% of our parliamentary seats. We know that online harassment and abuse has the very real potential to impact the participation and engagement of women in public and political life. Our Ministry for Women's working alongside the online safety organisation NetSafe to develop an online toolkit for workplaces who are supporting women in leadership positions, particularly those holding roles in the public eye. We've also made progress in reducing the gender pay gap from 9.2% in 2018 to 8.2% now. However, there's still more work to be done to close this gap for all women. Earlier this month, the government launched a gender pay gap toolkit, which has developed alongside businesses across the country to support them to understand and, importantly, take action to close the gender pay gap. Over the last 5 years, through consistent and deliberate action, the public service gender pay gap is at its lowest level, falling from 12.2% in 2018 to just over 6% in 2024. This demonstrates what can be done when we shine a light on the gender pay gap and take real steps to address it. Calculating gender pay gaps is important, but this alone will not close the gap. It requires collective effort across government and business. Work towards improving health outcomes for women and girls includes the extension of free breast cancer screening for women aged 70 to 74, which will mean around 120,000 more women will be eligible for screening every 2 years. The introduction last year of a world-leading self-test for cervical screening has seen more than 80% of women being tested take up this option. Safety from all forms of violence is fundamental to women's and girls' full and equal participation, as well as their health, well-being and economic outcomes. In December 2021, the National Strategy for the Elimination of Family Violence and Sexual Violence, Te Ao Rerekura, was launched and guides the efforts of government, whānau Māori or Māori families, New Zealand's Indigenous peoples, communities and specialist sectors to work together to address the underlying social conditions and norms that lead to family violence and sexual violence. It outlines an action plan with focus areas and community-led initiatives to reduce the rates of violence. While we celebrate our achievements and are proud of our ongoing progress, we acknowledge that more needs to be done. Chair, esteemed colleagues, I'd like to reconfirm New Zealand's ongoing commitment to gender equality for all women and girls. We need to continue to build on the progress we've made and continue to work together for the benefit of all women and girls in the Asia-Pacific region. We still have work to do, but we are stronger together. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of New Zealand. Now I invite the distinguished delegate of China, Honorable Vice Minister and Deputy Head of National Working Committee on Children and Women of the State Council of China, followed by Vietnam. Please be prepared, Vietnam. Please, you have the floor, Excellency.
尊敬的主席、各位同事，95世妇会通过了《北京宣言》和行动纲领，促成了男女平等、保障妇女权利的战略目标和政策框架。30年来，亚太区域在消除极端贫困、改善妇女健康和教育水平方面成就显著，但尚未任何国家完全实现性别平等。亚太作为世界经济增长的重要引擎，更应采取平等、包容、可持续发展的政策举措，充分激发妇女的潜力和活力，加速落实北京宣言和行动纲领。在此提3点建议：一是要坚持发展优先，把妇女的生存权、发展权放在更加突出的和紧迫的位置，实施普惠包容的发展战略，推动实现妇女事业和经济社会同步发展。二是赋能妇女全面发展，不断提升妇女素质素养等各方面发展能力，加大针对女性的金融服务，更加平等的参与高质量的发展，为更加平等的参与高质量发展创造条件。三是持续惠及各国妇女谋求发展的合力，积极开展人才培养、减贫、健康、数字经济等领域的交流合作，缩小各国妇女发展差距，共建共享更加美好的世界。尊敬的主席、各位同事，作为第4次世妇会东道国，中国一直认真履行承诺，积极落实北京宣言、行动纲领和2030可持续发展议程，始终把促进男女平等和妇女全面发展置于优先位置。国家主席习近平亲自擘画妇女事业发展蓝图，多次在联合国重要会议上阐述促进男女平等和妇女全面发展的中国主张。中国建立起包括100多部法律法规在内的全面保障妇女权益的法律体系，制定妇女发展纲要，提出保障和支持妇女平等参与经济社会发展的75项目标和93项措施，制定性别统计监测方案，并定期公布妇女状况统计资料，制定国家层面和31个省区市均建立了法规政策性别平等评估机制，将男女平等的价值理念贯穿于法律政策顶层设计和实施的全过程各方面。今年召开的中国共产党20届3中全会提出了300多项全面深化改革的重要举措，其中就包括要健全保障妇女儿童合法权益的制度。中国坚持以人民为中心的发展思想，不断增强妇女的获得感、幸福感和安全感。我们历史性的消除绝对贫困，实现脱贫的近1亿人口中，妇女约占1半。提前10年实现2030可持续发展目标议程的减贫目标。我们不断提高妇女健康和教育水平，女性人均预期寿命超过80岁，孕产妇死亡率降至10万分之15.1%。高等教育男女比例保持均衡。我们推动妇女深入参与科技创新，女性劳动参与率为63.7%，金融、互联网、注册会计师、知识产权等领域的从业女性占比超过1半以上，女科技工作者占45.8%。我们对侵害妇女儿童犯罪秉持零容忍的态度，建立多部门的联动工作机制，预防和支持针对妇女的家庭暴力和性骚扰，连续实施反对拐卖人口行动计划，运用 DNA、人脸识别、大数据等科技手段，增强打拐执法力度。尊敬的主席、各位同事，2025年是北京世妇会30周年，中方期待与各国一道回顾进展，直面挑战，携手努力，为早日实现全球男女平等，推动构建人类命运共同体贡献更大的力量。谢谢。
Thank you, Excellency, distinguished delegate of China. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate of Vietnam, Excellent Honorable Vice Minister of Labor, Invalids and Social Affairs of Vietnam, whom I now invite to take the floor, followed by Philippines. So Philippines, be prepared. Excellency, you have the floor from Vietnam.
Kính thưa Ngài Chủ tọa hội nghị, kính thưa các quý bà, quý ông, thay mặt đoàn đại biểu Việt Nam, tôi xin gửi lời chào trân trọng nhất tới Ngài Chủ tọa, các vị đại biểu tham dự Hội nghị Bộ trưởng Châu Á-Thái Bình Dương, đánh giá 30 năm thực hiện tuyên bố và cương lĩnh hành động Bắc Kinh. Chúng ta đến đây cùng nhau nhìn lại những công việc đã làm, những thành tựu đạt được vì sự tiến bộ của phụ nữ và bình đẳng giới, đưa ra các giải pháp hữu hiệu nhằm thúc đẩy hơn nữa việc thực hiện cương lĩnh hành động Bắc Kinh tại khu vực trong thời gian tới. Thưa Ngài Chủ tọa, thưa các quý vị, 30 năm qua, đặc biệt là giai đoạn 2019-2024, Chính phủ Việt Nam đã quyết tâm hiện thực hóa các mục tiêu của cương lĩnh hành động Bắc Kinh và các cam kết quốc tế khác về bình đẳng giới, nổi bật là việc xây dựng và củng cố luật pháp chính sách của quốc gia. Việt Nam nghiêm túc thực hiện lồng ghép giới về bình đẳng giới trong xây dựng và ban pháp luật và chính sách nhằm xóa bỏ những quy định mang tính chất phân đối xử với phụ nữ và nam giới, như Bộ luật Lao động 2019, Luật phòng chống bạo lực gia đình 2022, Luật Bảo hiểm xã hội 2024 và nhiều văn bản pháp luật khác đã có những quy định mới nhằm đảm bảo quyền của phụ nữ và thúc đẩy bình đẳng giới, phòng ngừa, ứng phó với bạo lực trên cơ sở giới, bạo lực gia đình. Chiến lược quốc gia về bình đẳng giới giai đoạn 2021-2030 được ban hành với nhiều mục tiêu, chỉ tiêu và các giải pháp nhằm thu hẹp khoảng cách giới, tạo điều kiện, cơ hội để phụ nữ và nam giới tham gia, thụ hưởng bình đẳng trong các lĩnh vực của đời sống xã hội, góp phần vào sự phát triển bền vững của đất nước. Bên cạnh đó, các chương trình về truyền thông thúc đẩy bình đẳng giới trong các lĩnh vực đã được Chính phủ ban hành và triển khai trên toàn thể quốc gia. Sự tham gia tích cực của chính quyền và các tổ chức chính trị xã hội từ trung ương đến địa phương trong việc thực thi pháp luật, chính sách đã đem đến nhiều kết quả quan trọng. Những nỗ lực và quyết tâm trên đã cải thiện rõ rệt vai trò, địa vị của phụ nữ Việt Nam. Chỉ số bình đẳng giới của Việt Nam được xếp hạng năm 2024 là 72 trên 146 quốc gia. Tỷ lệ nữ đại biểu Quốc hội luôn ở mức cao trong khu vực châu Á-Thái Bình Dương, đạt 30,26%. Phụ nữ Việt Nam chiếm 46,8% lực lượng lao động cả nước. Tỷ lệ tham gia lực lượng lao động của lao động nữ là 62,4%. Tỷ lệ doanh nghiệp do phụ nữ làm chủ đạt 28,2%. Ngày càng có nhiều gương mặt nữ và doanh nhân nữ, giám đốc điều hành tiêu biểu được các diễn đàn kinh tế thế giới ghi nhận, tôn vinh. Bên cạnh đó, khoảng cách giới trong tất cả các cấp giáo dục được thu hẹp. Hệ thống chăm sóc sức khỏe dành cho phụ nữ dân tộc thiểu số và phụ nữ di cư từ nông thôn ra thành thị được tăng cường. Hệ thống dịch vụ hỗ trợ người bị bạo lực được mở rộng và nâng cao về chất lượng. Bằng kinh nghiệm có được, Việt Nam cho rằng để đạt được những tiến bộ về bình đẳng giới, điều quan trọng là phải có sự thống nhất chung về nhận thức. Đó là phát triển kinh tế phải đi đôi cùng với tiến bộ công bằng xã hội, giảm nghèo và quan tâm đến các nhóm đối tượng dễ bị tổn thương, nhất là phụ nữ và trẻ em. Tăng cường hơn nữa hệ thống quản lý nhà nước về bình đẳng giới và lồng ghép vấn đề bình đẳng giới trong các chương trình, sáng kiến ở tất cả các cấp, các lĩnh vực. Thưa toàn thể quý vị, mặc dù đã đạt được những kết quả đáng khích lệ, nhưng cũng giống như nhiều quốc gia khác trong khu vực, Việt Nam vẫn đang đối mặt với một số khó khăn thách thức trong tiến trình này. Đó là định kiến giới vẫn tồn tại và cần thời gian để thay đổi. Số liệu thống kê có tách biệt giới chưa đầy đủ. Tốc độ già hóa dân số đang diễn ra nhanh. Tác động tiêu cực của biến đổi khí hậu, thiên tai và dịch bệnh đến đời sống của người dân, trong đó phụ nữ và trẻ em chịu ảnh hưởng nặng nề hơn. Do đó, chúng tôi vẫn cần phải tiếp tục có quyết tâm chính trị cao, đi đôi với các giải pháp chiến lược và tinh thần hợp tác quốc tế cùng phấn đấu vì sự nghiệp chung. Với mong muốn duy trì và phát huy những kết quả, thành tựu về bình đẳng giới, Việt Nam quyết tâm thực hiện các giải pháp đã nêu trong báo cáo quốc gia 30 năm rà soát thực hiện cương lĩnh và hướng tới hiện thực thành công chương trình nghị sự đến năm 2030 vì sự phát triển bền vững để không ai bị bỏ lại phía sau trong quá trình phát triển. Việt Nam sẽ tiếp tục tăng cường quan hệ đối tác giữa chính phủ và các bên liên quan. Trong đó có các cơ quan của Liên Hiệp Quốc để tối đa hóa sự hỗ trợ kết quả về bình đẳng giới và sự tiến bộ của phụ nữ. Kính chúc quý vị đại biểu mạnh khỏe, chúc hội nghị thành công tốt đẹp. Trân trọng cảm ơn.
Thank you, distinguished delegates from Vietnam. Now I invite the distinguished delegate of Philippines to please take the floor, followed by Mongolia. Please, Mongolia, be prepared.
Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, mabuhay from the people of the Republic of the Philippines. When remaining challenges are more than achievements, it is hard to celebrate. But let's celebrate anyway, and then let's do better next year. The Philippines reaffirm our commitment to continue and strengthen the implementation of the Beijing Platform for Action and the outcome of this review, to achieve an inclusive, gender-responsive, climate-resilient, and enduring peace that leaves no one behind. To realize our commitments, we have institutionalized legal and policy frameworks for the protection and fulfillment of women's rights in all aspects of life. These include the Magna Carta of Women, which is the Philippine version of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and numerous laws on ending violence against women and uplifting the lives of women in vulnerable populations, such as internally displaced people, people without nationality, people vulnerable to disasters and armed conflict, indigenous people, and women with intersectional disadvantage. The Philippines mainstreamed gender in high-level national sectoral and thematic plans of government and adopted gender-specific action plans for climate resilience, women, peace and security, and ending violence against women. We have effectively matched our commitment with a stable source of funding by legislating the use of 5 to 30% of our official development assistance and at least 5% of our annual national budget for gender and development initiatives. In 2023, approximately $1.178 billion or 16.1% of official development assistance and $14.5 billion or 23% of the national budget were allocated for gender and development. Currently, 246 government agencies are using their GAD budgets, while 109 agencies are strengthening their efforts to meet the standards of effective GAD budget utilization. Our GAD budgets are backed by strong accountability mechanisms. It is being monitored by the National Women's Machinery, Commission on Audit, Department of Budget and Management, National Economic and Development Authority, the Commission on Human Rights, which is the Gender Ombuds Machinery of the Philippines, the Oversight Committees of Senate and Congress, and the International Organization for Standardization, or ISO. When you have an institutionalized source of budget that implementers could easily access, implementation is facilitated, but we are not only interested in budgets and actions or implementation. We want measurable results that can be seen on the lives of women and girls. Recent statistics show that we have somehow delivered on the lives of women and girls. The Philippines has finally achieved gender parity in education this year, according to the 2024 Global Gender Gap Index. Moreover, life expectancies improved by 4 years for women and 6 years for men, with women exceeding men's life expectancy by 4 years. At 78, maternal mortality ratio is now only 8 points short of achieving the SDG target. Births delivered in health facilities increased from 77 to 88%, and adolescent birth rate has surpassed the SDG target by 8.3%. Female labor force participation rose to 54.7%. Female-headed households exhibit lower levels of poverty at 9.1%, and higher annual family savings. and thousands of women received emancipation and free land patents, certificates of land ownership, and tenure in residential lands. The Philippines is close to achieving 4 SDG targets on ending vow, and its new action plan has taken a strong preventive trajectory. However, many tough challenges remain, which we hope to address with international support. First, digitalization has mediated progress, but has also induced new forms of violence and gender disadvantage. Women's advancement will never be realized without equitable access to digital resources and without optimally harnessing the power of digital media to remove threats to women's well-being. Second, the International Conference on Women, Peace and Security held in the Philippines in October this year affirmed the imperative of confronting threats induced by climate change and armed conflict, which could lead to reversal of Beijing Platform for
Excellency,
Action gains.
Can you wrap up your statement? Conclude your statement, please.
Lastly, over 50% of the world's national women's machineries were created during the UN Decade for Women, meaning that they will be between 40 to 50 years old next year. It is time to pay attention to the predicament of national women's machineries and make sure that they are still effective and relevant in this changed context. In a world battered by crisis, our solidarity is our fortress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, distinguished Chairperson, Philippine Commission on Women. Now I would like to invite the distinguished delegate of Mongolia. The speaker will be the last speaker for this morning session. So please, Excellency, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to extend our sincere gratitude to the ESCAP and UN Women Regional Office for Asia Pacific for their successful coordination of the preparation of this important conference. Distinguished guests, according to the most recent Gender Gap Report 2024, we are 134 years away from gender equality. Thus, as we approach the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Conference, it is crucial time for the global community to empower all women and girls and achieve gender equality. It is a strategic necessity, not a moral imperative, to build a safer, fairer, more peaceful and prosperous world. We have no choice but to work together as representative of governments, international organizations, civil society, women and youth organizations, and academia for our collective responsibility. Madam Chair, Mongolia reaffirmed its commitment to the 1995 Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, SDG 5 in particular, to accelerate our efforts to achieve gender equality, women's participation, and women's and girls' empowerment in all domains. Women's empowerment and gender equality are vital to building fair, inclusive, prosperous, and peaceful societies everywhere. These are key to achieving SDG goals by 2030. Today, women constitute nearly half, or to be exact, 47.9% of Mongolia's labor force, and they play an essential role in various sectors of our economy, from education to small and medium enterprises. On the threshold of this historic anniversary, Mongolia made important progress on advancing the rights of women and girls and addressing gender-based discrimination. Particularly in 2023, legal and policy reforms aimed at increasing women's participation in decision-making, both at the social and political levels, were implemented. Mongolia has enshrined in its constitution a commitment to human rights and the promotion of gender equality across political, social, cultural, and economic domains. The constitutional amendment in 2023 enabled the 30% candidate quota for women. As a result, in the recent parliamentary election in Mongolia, 25.4% of all elected members were women, surpassing the average rate of 21.2% in Asia. Moreover, we have implemented legal and policy reforms designed to enhance women's participation at both social and political decision-making level. For example, the revised labor law enabled family-friendly and gender-sensitive workplace policy, including promotion of work-life balance, non-discrimination, and prevention of harassment and forced labor. National program on gender equality and the law on combating domestic violence have laid the foundation for society where every woman can live free from fear and violence. Currently, the draft family law is being under discussion in the Mongolian parliament, aimed at balancing the interests of family members, promoting gender equality, and prioritizing the rights and interests of women and children. Madam Chair, the government of Mongolia has been actively advocating the advancement of women's empowerment and promotion of gender equality, both at home and globally. Amidst the preparation for the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Program of Action, Mongolia initiated and successfully hosted the first World Women's Forum in August of this year, in collaboration with the UN under the theme Towards a Green Future. This forum brought together women leaders from across 5 continents to engage in constructive and candid discussions on issues central to women's empowerment, gender equality, and the essential role of women in all aspects of society. The outcome document, the Ulaanbaatar Declaration Towards a Sustainable Future, was adopted, which supports the implementation of the commitments outlined in the Beijing Declaration and Program of Action adopted in 1995, and calls for an action to achieve gender equality, inclusivity in emerging issues such as climate change. Mongolia also actively promotes feminist foreign policy, and to this end, initiated and organized first ever female foreign ministers meeting in Ulaanbaatar in June 2023, contributing to the achievement of the SDGs, in particular gender equality, highlighting the importance of women's participation and leadership in addressing global challenges, and strengthening their leadership and political will. In conclusion, let me reiterate Mongolia's unwavering commitment to continue actively progressing on empowering women and gender equality, building on the momentum of the World Women's Forum. We strongly believe that we cannot reach the goals of the SDGs without gender equality. It is at the heart of SDG 5 to ensure that women have the same rights and opportunities as men have. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Excellency, distinguished delegates, Honorable State Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Mongolia. You are the last speaker, so this brings us to the end of the proceeding for this morning. Please note that agenda item 2 will continue in this afternoon session, and I now call on the Secretariat to make any announcement. So please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we have a number of side events during this 3-day conference, hosted by different member states, UN entities, and CSOs on several topics linked to gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. These will be held on-site in different meeting rooms, and some are offering virtual participation with required registration. During the lunch break today, from 12:30 to 1:45 p.m., we have 5 side events taking place. Please refer to the ESCAP meeting website on the side events page for a full schedule and room information. Side events are being held in meeting rooms A, G, and H on 11-1, and in conference room 4 on 11-1, and on the theater on the ground floor. As far as your food options are concerned, which is most important, the international cafeteria is located on the first floor of the UNCC building. You can also find the Rajapurak Lounge located on the ground floor of the building, which serves various light meals, pastries, coffee, and beverages. Additionally, the garden area outside the lounge is hosting the Doitung Festival, featuring Northern Thai cuisine, handicraft, products from the social enterprise of Thailand, and more. Please enjoy your lunch and side events. Thank you, Madam, and back to you.
Thank you to the Secretariat. So on this note, I adjourn this meeting. We shall reconvene at 2 p.m. sharp. So please, this afternoon. So the meeting is adjourned.